皆様、こんにちは。私は日本生産性本部の原田と申します。本日は APO60 周年記念カンファレンスにご参加いただき、誠にありがとうございます。本日のカンファレンスは、日本とアジア生産性機構加盟各国地域をオンラインでつないで開催されます。Zoom からご参加の方で、日本語でのご視聴を希望される場合は、Zoom 画面の右下にございます地球のマークをクリックし、日本語を選択してください。なお、各セッションでのスピーカーへのご質問、ご意見は、Zoom の Q&A から日本語もしくは英語にて受け付けますので、ご質問、ご意見に加え、組織名、ご氏名を記入いただきたく存じます。それでは、ここから先の司会進行は、APO オフィサーのポンラシェット・クラプラユンさんにお願いいたします。
A warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for attending the International Conference on the Centrality of Productivity, organized jointly by the Japan Productivity Center and the Asian Productivity Organization. This event will start at 2 p.m. Japan Standard Time. Before we start, I'd like to call your attention to a few points. First, please silence or turn off your mobile phones and other electronic devices. Please refrain from unauthorized video or audio recording of this session. For participants attending via Zoom webinar, you can use the Earth icon to select Japanese or English language. Please note that today's sessions are being live streamed to all APO member countries. Finally, I'm Polchade Kraprayun, and I'll be your MC today. We appreciate your understanding and cooperation, and we'll get started in just a moment. To all our viewers from around the world, we are delighted to welcome you to the APO's International Conference on the Centrality of Productivity. For those of you who are participating virtually, this conference is being hosted in Tokyo, Japan, the birthplace of the productivity movement in Asia, organized in partnership with the Japan Productivity Center and with the support of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan. This event both celebrates the 60-year journey of the APO and reminds us of the continued importance of productivity as the key driver of long-term socioeconomic growth of organizations, nations, and individuals. I would now like to invite APO Secretary General, Dr. AKP Moktan, to give the opening remarks.
Greetings from Tokyo to all participants and viewers. Welcome to the APO's 60th anniversary event, the International Conference on the Centrality of Productivity. I also greet Chairman Yusaburo Mogi of the Japan Productivity Center, who is gracing this occasion with his presence with us today. For the viewers outside Japan, Mr. Mogi is also chairman and honorary CEO of a world-famous brand Keynote that produces soy sauce and other food products and beverage. Thank you very much for your presence, Chairman Mogi. I am very happy that the JPC and APO were able to organize this event even in the depths of the current pandemic. It has already been more than 1 year, but it feels much longer to most of us. The seemingly endless uncertainty and changing realities make us feel that we are navigating through a thick fog, searching for a safe passage forward. In many ways, this image reflects the situation of the Asia 6 decades ago when the APO was born in 1961. Asia was poor. We were less developed. We had dreams of prosperity, but huge populations and few or no resources made the course uncertain. Productivity served as our beacon. With the same limited resources, we push ahead ourselves to do more, produce better, and keep on making improvements. Today's Asia is a very different world from 60 years ago. We have seen fishing villages become lively metropolis and hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty on rising tides of prosperity. Productivity has been the central to this story of growth and human progress in our region. Our development challenges are ongoing, however, and the pandemic compounds them. No crisis lasts forever, and the human spirit of overcoming storms will prevail. Let us mark the Diamond Jubilee of the APO as a time for action, courage, and growth. Please join us as we sail forward and pass through the current fog toward a more inclusive, sustainable tomorrow. Thank you for joining us, and I sincerely hope that this conference will be inspiring and offer everyone exciting ideas and an awesome learning experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General, for your strong and inspiring words. JPC Chairman Yuzaburo Mogi will now welcome you all to the conference.
목당 지문局長
Secretary General Dr. Mokten, ladies and gentlemen, I am Yuzaburo Mogi, Chairman of Japan Productivity Center. I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations to the Asian Productivity Organization for its 60th anniversary. I would also like to thank Dr. Mokten, Secretary General, and everyone concerned for the tremendous support and cooperation that you have offered to our activities. With the establishment of Japan Productivity Center in 1955, Japan's productivity movement started. And last year, we celebrated our 65th anniversary. In those years, with the engagement of the business community, labor, academics, and the people of Japan at large, as a national movement, we have been addressing many challenges that accompany the changing times, building sound industrial relations, business manager education, and macro-level structural reform. We believe we have played various roles. And at the end of the 1950s, once Japan's productivity movement got on track, the direction of the movement was directed to the rest of Asia, and in 1961, Asia Productivity Organization was established as an international organization. It was indeed a great honor for us that Japan Productivity Center was able to play a role in its establishment. And thereafter, until today, APO has been the promoter of the productivity movement in the Asia Pacific, making great contributions to the economic growth of member countries and regions. We, a productivity organization in Japan, are delighted to see its success. And this year, which marks the 60th anniversary, under the program vision through 2025, inclusive and innovation-led productivity improvement, we understand that the organization will be working on building an innovation ecosystem, providing support to SMEs in promoting digitalization and promotion of lifelong education in an aging society. I would like to express my deepest respect for such efforts to improve productivity in the Asia Pacific. Global issues such as global warming and other serious environmental issues, and dealing with changes in the economic structure accompanied by the progress of digital technology are common challenges around the world. And this COVID-19 pandemic is dealing a huge blow to the socio-economic activities around the world. In Japan, in all levels, including production, consumption, education, and culture, activities are being restricted over a long period. Under such circumstances, for us to continue growing, each one of us must, under the philosophy of respect for people, develop our potential to the fullest and create added value to improve productivity. That is our only way forward. For sustained growth in the Asia Pacific, the role to be played by APO is only going to grow. We at Japan Productivity Center, from April of this year, set out our second midterm objectives with a banner of Japan's reform and productivity movement. From 3 years of laying the foundation to 3 years of reform implementation for the new 3-year period from 2021 to 2023. And we are currently working on our programs. One of the pillars of our objectives is enhancement of international collaboration. To support productivity enhancement in the Asia and Africa regions, we intend to work on development of local industrial human resources and to promote intellectual and human exchange, including consultation services. I would like to ask you, those at APO, to give us your continued support and cooperation. Lastly, I sincerely pray that APO will continue to develop further as a central organization to promote the productivity movement in the Asia Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Mogi, for sharing your insights and words of support for the APO and its mission of inclusive, innovation-led productivity improvement. We also appreciate the JPC's long partnership with the APO from its founding to the present day and look forward to continuing and strengthening this partnership in the years to come. I would now like to invite Japanese Minister of Foreign Affairs, Takashi Uto, to give the inaugural address for the conference.
Dr. Muktan, アジア生産性機構事務局長、茂木日本生産性本部会長、APO メンバー理事、生産性本部関係者各位皆様、日本国外務副大臣の宇多隆です。 本日はアジア生産性機構 APO の60周年記念イベントでご挨拶させていただくことを嬉しく思います。 APO の設立60周年を心からお祝い申し上げます。過去60年の APO の歩みは必ずしも平坦なものではありませんでした。戦争や紛争、経済危機、自然災害など APO は激動の年月の中でその任務を果たしてきました。また環境・気候変動問題、高齢化社会など60年前には顕在化していなかった新たな課題にも APO は対応する必要がありました。そのような中 APO は時代の要請を踏まえ各国地域のニーズに応じ生産性そして人々の生活の質の向上という切り口から解決策を提示し続けてきました。専門家派遣、各種研修など人材育成の努力を続けてきました。またグリーンプロダクティビティ、緑の生産性という持続可能性を踏まえた生産性向上の指針を国際社会に提示しました。さらに APO メンバーが生産性を向上させるための国内の制度設計、計画策定を支援してきました。アジア太平洋地域は過去60年の間に急激な経済成長を遂げましたが、生産性運動が果たした役割を我々は忘れるべきではありません。日本の改善や 5S といった手法は日本生産性本部や多くの専門家、企業関係者によって広く APO メンバーに共有され、生産性向上運動の礎を築いてきました。さらに現在ではインドの IT、シンガポールのビジネスエクセレンスなど各メンバーの強みが好事例として共有されています。相互協力の精神の下での継続的な事業の実践と成果は称賛に値します。皆様、本日のこのイベントは我々が直面する課題を認識し、将来社会の展望を共有し、課題解決に向けて生産性の取り組みを再強化する新しい60年の始まりを告げるものです。新型コロナが人類を襲い、世界は一変しました。各国で外出規制措置などが取られ、需要が大幅に落ち込むとともにサプライチェーンの寸大による供給制約が生じ、グローバルな人や物の流れが急速に収縮しています。こうした中、デジタル化の促進、流通手法の改善、社員研修等の生産性向上にかかる取り組みはその重要性を一層増しています。先月、菅義偉総理大臣はアジアと世界の新たな成長の原動力の鍵はグリーンとデジタルであると指摘しました。環境や資源の持続可能性を確保することはビジネスチャンスとなり、成長のエンジンとなり得ます。また今回のコロナの経験はテレワーク、遠隔医療、教育などこれまでの我々の働き方やサービスの提供手段を見直す契機にもなりました。新型コロナという国際的なパワーバランスを変えるゲームチェンジャーによってグリーンエコノミーとデジタルエコノミーのフロンティアが大きく広がっています。そのグリーンとデジタルの促進はまさに APO が高い専門性を有し、地域の生産性向上を主導してきた分野です。 APO はウィズコロナ、ポストコロナの時代においてより一層の活躍を果たす十分な土壌を有していると言えます。皆様、60年後我々の子孫たちはどのような課題に直面しているでしょうか。世界の人口は100億人を超え、多くの国で高齢化が進み、ひょっとしたら残念なことに新たな感染症やそれ以外の課題と格闘しているかもしれません。しかし社会構造や課題が変容してもインプットからアウトプットを最大化する生産性向上の重要性は何ら失われることはありません。 APO は過去そうであったように、そして今日そうであるように、時代の要請に沿って地域の経済社会開発に貴重なインプットを提供し続けるでしょう。 APO のこれまでの60年の業績に敬意を示すとともに、次の60年に向けた取り組みに期待して私の開会の挨拶とさせていただきます。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mr. Udo, for your warm words and broad perspective. This conference is one of the key events marking the 60th anniversary of the founding of the APO. The Tokyo Statement on the Centrality of Productivity is being officially announced today to reaffirm APO member economies' commitment to raising productivity in the Asia Pacific. The Secretary General will now make the official announcement of the Tokyo Statement.
Greetings to everyone once again. On behalf of the Asian Productivity Organization, it is a great honor and privilege for me to launch the Tokyo Statement on the Centrality of Productivity and to share with you its main features and intents. In brief, the Tokyo Statement is a gift to the APO on reaching the historical milestone of its 60th year. Founded in 1961, the APO has completed 5 cycles of life. In many Asian cultures, this is an auspicious moment marking a rebirth and a beginning of a new phase on a higher plane of existence. The APO has grown from strength to strength during the past 6 decades. The Diamond Jubilee this year is especially momentous considering the very harsh challenges we all are facing because of the COVID-19 pandemic. For this reason, the Tokyo Statement is dedicated to our productivity trailblazers and forerunners as a homage to the journey of enabling the region's socioeconomic growth during the past 6 decades, while at the same time looking forward to starting anew with gratitude, wisdom, and vigor. The Tokyo Statement has its roots in the Vision 2025, which embodies our aspirations to promote inclusive, innovation-led growth in the region, and it highlights 7 priority areas. Our challenges ahead are demanding, complex, and urgent. With resolve and tenacity as encapsulated in the Tokyo Statement, the APO is set to move forward toward greater accomplishments and successes in the year ahead. Happy birthday, APO, and a salute to productivity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Secretary General Mokhtar. Now, I am honored to welcome and introduce our keynote speaker for this conference, Professor Paul Krugman. Professor Krugman is a distinguished professor of economics at the City University of New York. He's an economist, public intellectual, New York Times columnist, and winner of the 2008 Nobel Memorial Prize for Economic Sciences for his groundbreaking work on international trade and economic geography. After graduating from Yale University in 1974, Professor Krugman completed a PhD in economics at MIT in 1977. He served as a professor of economics at MIT, Stanford University, and later at Princeton University, and has been a New York Times opinion columnist since 2000. He is the author and editor of 20 books and more than 200 papers in professional journals. His books include The Return of Depression Economics and the Crisis of 2008 and End This Depression Now. Today, he will talk about the prospects of the market economy and society in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the key role of public policy in moving us towards a brighter future.
I'm Paul Krugman of City University of New York, speaking to you from Princeton, New Jersey. I'd like to thank Secretary General Dr. AKP Mokhtar for inviting me to speak to the APO International Conference. And I'm going to talk to you for a little while about the prospects for socioeconomic change in this very unusual world that we're now entering. I'm going to say a few words that are, I hope not unrealistically optimistic, but I think there are, despite all of the enormous tragedy that we've been through this past year and a half, I think there are actually some reasons to think that we may be on a path towards a better future. And I'll try to talk about the reasons why I think that might be so. So, starting point, of course, is that we've been through, are still going through, an extraordinary catastrophe, a pandemic. I could say that nothing like this was anticipated. Actually, a number of people had been warning about the possibility of some kind of pandemic. It has been vast. Even by official numbers, well over 3 million people have died, and there's reason to believe that that number is grossly understated. It's a very, very large number of deaths, a very large number of people sickened, large number of people's lives upended. So an enormous amount of damage done by this microbe. It's not anywhere close to over. From a global perspective, we're still close to the worst moment. A bifurcation of perceptions about the pandemic right now, because at this point, country experiences are very uneven. In wealthy countries, and in a different way in China, which is the most successful of the developing nations so far, we appear to have really turned the corner. The vaccinations have been a miraculous achievement, scientifically, technologically, even in terms of production and distribution. And the pandemic appears to be sputtering out. Has already done so in, well, Israel's a small country, the UK substantially bigger. UK is having a few problems now because of reimportation of the virus, which I'm sitting just outside New York at the moment. And here in the northeastern United States, we are clearly heading for something that looks like an Israeli type scenario where the virus won't go away completely, but has largely gone away. Normal life will be able to resume. So things are looking pretty good if you happen to be living in a rich country with an effective distribution network which has secured large supplies of the vaccines. But the catastrophes continue, and the death toll remains horrific. In fact, we're reaching what appears to be collapse of healthcare systems, and particularly in India, but in some other places as well. So it's a very uneven story. Where does this take us? What does this do to the nature of both our national societies at the level of the individual countries and the state of the world? The economic impact, it was wildly unequal. Some of us were able to continue doing our jobs, earning our income while working from home, but many of the worst paid workers were in contact-intensive occupations, service occupations, and their jobs simply went away. And so at the moment we have a K-shaped recovery where people at the top are going up and people at the bottom are still going down. And so it's been hugely unequalizing. And then, of course, internationally, contrast between the sense of relief, celebration in wealthy countries as widespread vaccination brings us closer to something that may or may not be herd immunity, but is something more like normal life. Inequality, unfairness, injustice. This was a plague that afflicted the already afflicted and by and large bypassed those who were in pretty good shape to begin with. So all of that is a negative, and you might think that bodes very badly for the future. We've just seen a sort of graphic illustration of the unfairness of life, at both at a national and at a global level. However, there have been some hopeful aspects to this whole thing. And there are some reasons to think that we may, out of all this tragedy, be laying some foundations for a better world. Not a perfect world, that's never going to happen, but a better world. Start with the somewhat parochial perspective of the advanced countries. If we look at what actually happened, we have had, let's not forget, extraordinary scientific, logistical, technological, and in important ways, political triumph. The vaccines came along faster than anyone thought possible. They came together through an extraordinary intellectual effort. If you actually ask who intellectually was responsible for the developments, it's an astonishingly global thing. It spans many countries, it spans many different national origins. And when you have Turkish origin scientists in Germany developing a vaccine that ends up being, where the production process ends up being perfected, and at least in part in the United States, that's productive globalism of a kind that is, is almost like a dream of how the global system should work. We've had a demonstration, not just in the development of the vaccine, but in the distribution of the vaccine, of the capacity of well-intentioned, competent, determined public policy to work. Again, I have a bit of a parochial U.S. view, but I don't think it's entirely uniquely to the United States. In the United States, we happen to have we did develop the vaccines under the previous administration, but the task of getting them out there, getting shots in arms, fell to the new administration. We've had a massively impressive demonstration of competence, demonstration that if you are determined, if you learn, there were some missteps. We've found out that a lot of people were being bypassed by the distribution efforts, but once it got going, targets were reached well ahead of schedule. Dissemination of the vaccine went quickly. As I speak, we had a lull. There was a slightly concerning, more than slightly concerning lull as we got past the point where the supply of vaccines was the constraint and reached the point where willingness or ability to get around to getting vaccinated became the constraint. They didn't just sit there and let that happen. They said, okay, what do we need to fix? How do we need to change how it's being distributed? How do we need to change the messaging? They got the rates of vaccination back up so that we are now vaccinating once again at a rapid pace, not quite as high as before, but enough so that it's extremely likely that we'll be at a point where this thing just sort of fades out in the United States, as it already has in Britain, as it already has in some smaller countries. And although Western Europe got off to a problematic start, they didn't get going for a variety of reasons. They're getting their act together. So we're now seeing vaccination rates in much of Western Europe that now match or surpass those in the countries that were at the cutting edge initially. So we're going to see this whole thing working. And basically what we're seeing is that public policy for the public good can work. And I think that's something that's a lasting lesson. I don't think people will simply return to the same old cynicism, the same old reluctance to try and do good once this is over. So that's a really positive development, and it can apply to a lot of things, including some crises that are even bigger than the coronavirus. We've also seen a surprisingly decent response to the social and economic fallout of the pandemic. We certainly had it was a severe blow And the very uneven blow, again, highly paid professionals with jobs that can be done remotely were barely affected, whereas a lot of people found that their normal source of livelihood went away, and a lot of disruption of things like the disruption of schooling meant that a lot of people couldn't work because of they had children to take care of, and so on down the line. We had a previous experience of a major global economic crisis, and the response to that crisis was, in many ways, deeply disappointing. What happened after the financial crisis of 2008 and its aftermath was there was some response. The first year, we did a bunch of stuff. The financial fallout was contained, but the human fallout, by and large, was not. We had a situation of enormous suffering, vastly inadequate support for economic recovery, and I'm afraid, I expected to see the same thing. I had been educated by the last crisis to expect the worst of the political process in my own country and elsewhere. That's not what happened. Far more aggressive, effective policy response than we did last time. Relief programs, the rescue programs, of course they were not perfect. Of course they could have been done better. They were, both in terms of scale and in terms of design, far better than we saw a dozen years earlier, and also far better than I think almost anyone expected. I certainly came in expecting that we'd see the worst, that we'd see stinginess, that we'd see a lot of blaming of the victims, all of the things that went wrong in 2009, 2010. We saw a lot less of that. We saw programs that were actually more or less adequate in scope. In the United States, we had an initial relief plan of $3 trillion, which even for an economy as big as the US is a lot of money, with the details really quite spectacularly generous, at least by historical standards. The United States, at least initially, was offering $600 a week in supplemental unemployment benefits to those idled by the pandemic, with a broadened definition of who was eligible for benefits, which meant that a huge cushion. Now, people fell through the cracks. In many ways, we discovered that for all of the inherent administrative competence of a country like the United States, it takes some time, and we did not have enough machinery to deal with everyone, to reach everyone who needed help. And we never did reach everyone who needed help, but we reached a lot of people, and we reached them with quite generous aid, enough so that in the United States, poverty actually fell substantially in the face of the crisis. The willingness to spend money on social solidarity actually drastically reduced the amount of misery that took place, and in some ways, some people ended up, at least in material terms, better off than before. Now, receiving an aid check is not the same as having a job, and I think everybody, including those who are receiving the checks, will be happy once they're able to work again. But the point was that we managed to avoid a great deal of material hardship. We managed, in the US, where we have an employment-linked health insurance system, we managed to pretty much avoid any rise in the number of people denied adequate health care. We just did really, really well. And it was an interesting question, why did we do that? How did that happen? And there are some idiosyncratic stories. Was that we actually happened to have top leadership in the country who were completely at a loss, had no idea what to do. And so the actual policymaking devolved to lower level politicians who actually did know something. And so for once, the people who actually had thought about problems like this managed to devise the programs which were then adopted because they were the only programs that were being put on offer. So there's an element of cynicism to all that, but there's something else. Big progress towards social justice. Maybe it's perverse, but it actually tends to happen in the aftermath of major wars. We took big steps towards greater equality, broader provision of the essentials of life after the First and especially after the Second World War. It was, to take a non-US example, it was the Second World War that gave rise to Britain's National Health Service, which is now an inseparable part of British life. And so, and the thing about something like this, something like a pandemic, is it is really hard for people to look at other people suffering and not say, they didn't do anything to deserve that. Life can be unfair. Can't we do something to make it a little bit less unfair? And so does tend to be a sense of social solidarity in the face of a really broad gauge catastrophe that can have a lasting legacy. And I believe that this has happened, at least to some extent, as a result of COVID-19. That not only, first of all, we saw that it was possible to drastically improve people's lives by providing government aid, that the government can do something to make people's lives better. And that's not a lesson that's immediately forgotten. All of the reasons why you couldn't do this, why you couldn't actually give people money so that they could afford to live during an economic downturn, those arguments were silenced by the sheer scale of the COVID-19 catastrophe. So we went ahead and did it, and it worked. We saw just a tremendous amount of visible improvement, and that's a lesson that is hard to unlearn. We've learned that you can do a lot of good things. And it does, I believe, that's a lesson that applies not just to the policies undertaken in the heat of the crisis, but to what you do afterwards. And again, I'm to some extent I'm strongly influenced by the US scene, but it's not unique to the United States. You can see some of the same things happening even in countries with more conservative governments, or countries that conversely already had more elaborate social programs than the US. We've come out of this having moved the window, having had a stronger sense in the body politic that we really are our brother's keepers, that there are some things that are bad things happen that are nobody's fault and can't be solved just by people showing more initiative. You really do need help. They need help, if only to be able to be in a position to exercise initiative, and that we can do something about them, that we can actually have public policies that help those in need. And if we look at the US, quite a few ideas that had been scholars of policy had long been arguing for things like universal child care, family allowances to make it easier for parents to have the resources to raise their children. But although those things had always had substantial intellectual support, substantial economic logic, they were somehow outside the bounds of what was considered politically possible. Now it appears quite likely that they will happen. We've already, on a transitory basis, but it's likely to be permanent, we've already instituted major expansion of healthcare, major aid to families with young children in ways that were just non-starters before COVID-19 and are now well on their way to being just part of the fabric of US life. And we're seeing some similar things happening in other countries as well. Many other countries already had some of those things that we considered impossible here, but they are happening. So we are, I think, in some, it was not worth paying the price of millions of deaths to get here, but the silver lining is that you get some improvement, some greater justice in policy in the advanced world. What about international? developing countries paying a much, much heavier price in lives and economic losses than wealthy countries, even though they're far less able to afford all of that. The rise of vaccine nationalism has been scary. Cutting off international supply chains exactly when they're most needed. The travel restrictions have been arbitrary and have in many ways been really disruptive to lives and to the prospects of countries that really need access to the global marketplace. But on the other hand, we have seen more acknowledgement of interdependence than we've seen before. We actually have seen, as I speak, as I record this, the United States is about to send large quantities of vaccines to countries that need them. Now, it should have happened before. We should be sending more. We should be doing much more to help production of vaccines around the world. But it's still aid on a scale that we haven't really seen from the United States since the Marshall Plan after World War II. We really are seeing an acknowledgement that basically nobody is safe unless everybody is safe. And we're starting to see some real cooperation. We're seeing an understanding that sometimes being generous, sometimes being willing to share and to help those in need, even if they happen to be in other countries, is not just the morally right thing to do, but also practical. Actually makes your own life better and more secure. Remains to be seen, but I think that this at least makes it more possible that we'll do the right thing on other fronts. And of course, the ultimate challenge is climate change. That's the biggest. At some level, nothing else matters unless we can eventually, and not too far in the future, really get a grasp on that. And that is the quintessential global problem. There it is really the case that nobody is safe unless everybody does it. We have to limit greenhouse gas emissions everywhere if we're going to have any hope of avoiding catastrophic climate developments. The politics have always been enormously difficult. The problem, not just the internal politics, but the problems of cooperation. But we're in the midst of seeing a lot of acknowledgement of the virtues of cooperation, of the fact that treating other countries as if they matter is actually in your own self-interest. And I do believe that will generalize. I do believe that we're going to be seeing a more generous, more cooperative world looking forward, and that this is going to be something that is going to help us going forward. Now, there's the climate change, a whole other issue here, but climate change is in a peculiar state right now. On the one hand, time is running out. The chances of catastrophic change have really gotten very strong. On the other hand, the technology has made huge strides. It has never been easier to imagine a truly effective global climate policy. So all that is really needed is the political ability to get it together. And in this perverse way, the nightmarish catastrophe of COVID-19 has made that kind of global cooperation more possible than it seemed. Whether it'll be enough, nobody knows, but I'm actually coming out of this feeling that our chances of dealing with the things that have to be dealt with are substantially better than I would have expected them to be 2 years ago before all of this happened. We'll see, but it has been a nightmare, a catastrophe. We've all seen our lives, those of us who survived, even those of us who've done okay financially, have seen our lives enormously disrupted. But there's a lot of hope involved in how we've dealt with all of this. And I'm hopeful. I can't quite say that I'm anticipating, but I'm of the belief that we may be about to see world affairs take a significant turn for the better. And on that note, good luck with your conference.
Thank you, Professor Krugman, for sharing your insights with us and for giving us some positive things to consider with regard to the post-pandemic world. The next session will be a panel discussion on the quality of the workforce, human resource investment for economic growth, and stable social formation. It will look at how firms and organizations should invest in people to drive economic growth and improve society, especially with regard to the fourth industrial revolution. Before the start of the session, please note that anyone viewing can ask our speakers questions on the Zoom webinar. If time permits, some of these questions may be addressed during the discussion by the moderator. I'd like to now introduce our moderator as well as our speakers for the session. Our moderator is Chairman Kazuhiko Toyama of Industrial Growth Platform Incorporated. He received a BA in law from the University of Tokyo, an MBA from Stanford University, and passed the Japanese National Bar examination. Highly praised in Japan's business landscape, he has led various companies and organizations across the private and public sectors, offering management consultancy, supporting industrial revitalization initiatives, and providing advice on public policies. Our first speaker is Dr. Vesselina Recheva. Dr. Recheva is a researcher and analyst at the World Economic Forum. She holds a PhD in social anthropology and has an MSc in comparative and cross-cultural research methods from Sussex University, as well as a BA in social anthropology and maths from Cambridge University. As a senior researcher at the WEF, her work provides timely insights and actionable recommendations to industry and policy leaders. Dr. Recheva has over 10 years of experience in research in both academia and applied settings, with a thematic focus on skills, labor markets, inclusion, equity, and ethnicity. She leads the WEF's New Metrics Collab, which forges data partnerships to uncover innovative measures of social and economic systems, and has managed the forum's Global Future Council on New Metrics, as well as the Council on Equity and Inclusion. Our next speaker is Mr. Francis Scholl, a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author. He's the founder and also the CEO of The Human Company, a Fortune 500 C-suite strategic advisory firm. Scholl helps companies rethink business in ways that conventional strategic management cannot. His award-winning innovative model for complex decision-making, the Intuitive Compass, enables clients to adapt, innovate, deliver outstanding performance, leapfrog competitors, and thrive in disruption. He's published 3 trade books, contributed to multiple collected volumes, and writes articles in specialized media. In addition to teaching and lecturing at leading global graduate schools, Scholl is the founder and pedagogy director at Squircle Academy and founder and president of the board of the Know Better World Foundation. Our final speaker is Ms. Yuka Shimada, Director of Human Resources and General Affairs at Unilever Japan Holdings. She obtained a BA from Keio University and an MA in Organizational Psychology from Columbia University. As a highly accomplished HR professional, she is one of Japan's leading figures in workforce development with specialized experience in leadership, training and development, and HR services. She also serves on the board of directors of Unilever Japan. I would like to welcome our speakers and the moderator and invite them to join us on stage or to connect with us virtually to kick off this session. Mr. Toyama, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to moderate this great panel at this great event, APO's 60th Anniversary International Conference. Okay, so for the beginning, I'd like to point a little bit over the problems, what I have, and about the quality of the workforce. I believe this issue is very, very critical and important nowadays, not just for the business side, but also the whole public world global issues as well. And in that sense, I really believe we have a really great panels today. And okay, so obviously we are now in the midst of so-called disruptive innovation, maybe driven by the globalization and so-called digital revolution. Today's we call it DX. And it seems to me that this innovation seems to be accelerating even more than due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it creates some good things, but also creates some new problems. So maybe that's going to be today's main issues for today. If you look at this number, or this is a ranking of the market capitalization, comparing the 1989 and 2019. This data is a little bad news for the Japanese, actually. We used to be, dominate 7 of the top 10 Japanese companies, but nowadays they disappeared. But instead, there are many new type of the digital, or knowledge-intensive companies are dominating the top 10 ranking of the world. And it sounds like, the business is becoming more like knowledge-intensive and human-centric. But on the other hand, if you look at the same data, a comparison between 89 and 19 of the US market, you can see in 1989, basically even in the US, more like a classic, manufacturing type of the large corporation was dominating the top 10 ranking of US stock market. And those companies at the same time had a very thick and many middle-class employment in the US. But nowadays, this list is dominated by the, more like a digital or more like a very knowledge-intensive and very, professionally high knowledge-based companies. It means they don't have, equivalent power to create their middle-class workers in the industries today. So it's a little bit, I would say, shadows of the disruptive innovation, because as already discussed in this conference, it might be one of the causes of the inequality or the division of the society, because nowadays always many countries are facing the sort of disruption of the middle class workers in many countries, and including US and also Japan. So anyway, we are moving toward an era of the competition among human capital. It's clear, but on the other hand, we also are facing many problems. And if you look at this number, it is interesting data we got. From 1970 to 1990, it was still a time of the more capital-intensive industries like manufacturing and the assemblies and so on and so forth. Those more industrial companies were dominating the economies. At that time, the economic growth, GDP growth, and inequality was no correlation. But after that, from 1995 to 2015, it looks like a little bit relation between the growth and the inequality. So it's becoming a little bit trade-off. If you ask for more, growth of the economy, you might have the risk to, enhance the inequality of the society. So this creates another problem. So again, innovation drives the growth of the economy. It's good, but at the same time, innovation might create another social problems. So we have to challenge this issue to overcome today's many problems, and including maybe environment as well. And actually, this slides as actually my originals about what kind of industries are dominant in especially countries like OECD type of countries. This is the case of Japan. The horizontal axis is the type of the business. The G industry means more like a global competitive industries like IT or global manufacturing and so on and so forth. And the L industry means more like restaurants and hotels or transportation, and so it's more and the medical services is more like more local based very fragmented industries. And actually, in the OECD country, like OECD countries, typically G industries share goes down because under the globalization, they can choose any place they like, which is more advantageous for their competitions. But the local industry cannot move away. So naturally, where in the OECD countries, typically the wage cost is high, and maybe energy cost is high, and the environmental regulation is also, the things are very strict. So it seems to be, it tend to, those global type of the industry, like huge plants and the facilitation tends to go away from those countries, instead more like the local industries stay within those countries, and vertical axis is the place. Many people believe that the huge concentration is happening into the Tokyo metropolitans, but it's just 30% of the GDP. And actually, if you look at the GDP growth, Tokyo city's growth is maybe ranking 40 out of 47 prefectures in Japan. So actually, the GDP growth is slowing down in Tokyo area. And the rural areas in some rural areas have higher growth of the GDPs. So it's a little bit intuitive, but this is really happening in Japan. So it also means the typical global company like a Toyota or Panasonic or Sony or those companies only share 20% of the workers. Actually, 80% of the workers are working at the local industries. And typically those countries small and medium enterprise, SMEs. So, and also it's also true that the productivity is higher for global businesses like a Toyota or Panasonic or Sony's. And the productivity, especially labor productivity is very low in those local businesses. And it's also caused some inequality and division of the society, but also if we look, if we try to realize the economic growth in the country like this, we have to enhance or bring up the productivity of those local businesses as well. But so far, it seems to me that the DX or those innovation is not, yet bringing truly the fruits for those industries. That's another issue. Okay, let me wrap up my problem statement. DX and IX means industrial transformation, will accelerate. And the human capital will be the key for the productivity enhancement and for surviving the competitive market even more. And so far, top knowledge talent has been the key for the success. But in the future, more importantly, for rebuilding the middle class workforce, we have to, invest on the human capitals and the digital revolutions. Those things must be, more utilized for those middle class workforce rebuilding, I believe. And secondly, what are the human resource management challenges for inclusive and sustainable growth in the knowledge-intensive era? And of course, business enterprises has a very important role, and also government policy and regulations will have a very, assume the very important roles. And also education facilities like a college and those things, and especially now the new technology coming in, the skills are changing, so maybe more like a recurrent education is becoming very important. And eventually, as a society as a whole, what the society should do, what kind of new social unit, community can play the role for the problem, those problems. Okay, these are my issues and the problems to be raised. And now let me move on and hands on this microphone to the great panel speakers. And the first, the Vesselina from Switzerland. Are you ready? I think in the Switzerland is very, very early in the morning. Good morning, Vesselina, and please start your presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to share more about the analysis we've conducted in the World Economic Forum on the future of jobs. I'll share a few slides and also comment on those slides to try and paint a bit of a picture on what we've seen happen for about half a decade now. We've been tracking the future of jobs, so how jobs and skills are changing in the context of the technological adaptation in 3 editions of our Future of Jobs report, which is the primary core analysis that I'll be sharing more about in this presentation. So what is happening? Let's start with the current moment. In the current moment, what we're seeing is that companies are adopting more and more technologies. They're recognizing that these different technologies are able to drive higher productivity. They're able to solve some of the problems they're facing, and they're able to open up new business models. We've been tracking this since the 2016 edition of our Future of Jobs report. You can see here on this figure what we noted in the last edition of this report, what kinds of technologies are set to be in increase. And when we first started tracking these trends, some of these technologies that are more frontier ones, such as robotics, were very low on the scale. And we've seen them go up and up, in particular non-humanoid robotics. And we've seen that actually some of the things we thought were futuristic are starting to become a reality. There are, of course, the mainstays of today's digital economies. There's cloud computing, there's big data analytics, there's the Internet of Things. A lot of companies, about 80% of companies in our surveys are actually telling us they're starting to adopt these. And that adaptation isn't always smooth, but as you see, it requires a combination of technological challenges to be solved, as well as some human capital challenges to be solved. Now, we are in a very distinctive moment. As you know, throughout history, we go through periods of strife, when our labor markets are deeply impacted by external events. Today, the COVID-19 pandemic has thrown many people into unemployment across the world, and it has very disparate effects on different economies. And what we are facing today is a very different challenge from what we were facing maybe a year or 2 ago, when we're thinking that we're going to have this rate of digitization is going to displace workers. We're going to have to think of ways to transition the labor market and the workforce to a new reality. But we are going to have a little bit of room for maneuver. This has closed a lot more. Many people are facing significant challenges to their livelihoods. And we know that the labor market is a lot more scarred by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is happening? For actually the past 2 years, we've understood one key thing, which is the share of work being performed by machines and automated labor in the labor market is actually increasing. And the projection right now, modestly, is by 2025, the share of work hours done by people and machines or algorithms is going to be roughly equal. Does that mean people no longer have work in the future of work? No, it does not actually. And many projections are suggesting that this could also have a complementary area of job creation in different fields. What we're also seeing as parallel running trends is digitization. Around 80% of companies are really accelerating digitization. In the context of COVID-19, it's also been a resistance to try and actually tackle the fact that many people couldn't physically work in offices. And this has actually taken the previous trends we were tracking and just supercharged it so that everyone is now trying to work out how do we work remotely? How do we change our processes so that they can be done through the internet, through a home office? Now, the jobs landscape that we're seeing as a result of these changes is different. There are a set of roles that are declining, and there are workers currently in those roles. And those roles are mostly the ones that require routine work, routine manual work sometimes, but not always. So what is really being displaced is really the work that is repetitive, that is equally automatable. And what we're seeing growing are roles that are higher value added roles that require different kinds of skills in many cases. We're not actually projecting right now that we think there will be a jobs shortfall. But what we're seeing is what you can see on this right-hand side as the declining roles, and on the left-hand side as the increasing roles, are quite different. And that requires a transition. And that means that the people who are likely to have to be tapped for those new opportunities that are growing, that are actually the opportunities that will be growing companies as well. These are the roles that are going to supercharge companies in the future of work. Those will need some additional reskilling and upskilling. One last thing to note is that in the declining roles, we also include traditional roles that are the kind of the benchmark of building out the middle classes, like accountants, like some aspects of legal work, because there are aspects of that work that is very repetitive, that is very routinized, and that can be automated. Future-facing roles that are fast-growing in today's labor markets. We've been able to distill this in 10 major clusters. And you see 8 of those clusters are ones that are growing very organically, and 2 of those clusters are actually ones that will depend on the investments governments will make in the policy arena. Those 2 clusters are the care economy and the green economy, and they're really the kinds of roles that will really help us get to a more inclusive labor market, to a more inclusive economy, but they do require more policy attention. Whereas the rest of the job clusters that we're looking at here, they have been fast growth job clusters for a number of years now, and independently of the investments governments make, will actually prosper and continue to grow. And this is what the area of opportunity in the labor market looks like. So we see that it includes technological roles. So there are definitely spaces for data and AI, for cloud computing, but also the in-between roles, product development, the people who help package products that are often digital products, as well as very human roles, like roles in HR and people and culture that are going to help shape the talent needed to grow enterprises. We are, however, in a bit of a challenging situation when it comes to talent. We have an executive opinion survey that surveys business executives across 150 economies. And what we've seen is for a number of years, education systems have not been rated strongly. They're a bit better rated in advanced economies, they're a bit more poorly rated in developing economies, and that really hasn't budged. In parallel, many businesses, especially in advanced economies, are downgrading their ability to find skilled employees. They're saying it's becoming increasingly difficult. It's a little bit different in emerging markets where there is this new investment in some cases in improving the skills and education space, and that has seen a small uplift there. But really in advanced developed economies, we're finding that talent shortages are becoming endemic, and our education systems are really not fit for purpose. We're facing a large skills challenge. We asked employers roughly how many of those employees that you have in your workplaces need very different skill sets. And then also, if you think of your average employee, what kind of share of skills that they currently have need to be upgraded. And about 40% of current employee skill sets need to be upgraded. This is a mindset shift change, because what we used to think and what our whole systems are set up for is you invest early in life with skills and education. People are set up well for a labor market that is moving at a reasonable pace. But actually that acceleration of our technologies is driving an accelerated need for different kinds of skills. And that means that we need new systems for mid-career reskilling and upskilling that has to happen more dynamically. Without that, we're going to continue to see that line of talent shortages and businesses not being able to get the kinds of skilled employees they need become more and more pronounced. And what we're also hearing from many business executives is that's actually holding their innovation agenda backwards. the largest, predominantly largest factor holding back technological adoption is actually the skills of employees that will be working in tandem with those technologies. So let me end on the kinds of skills that we need to build. And this is one part of a much larger taxonomy of skills that we've been able to map. Actually, the big skills that we need to invest in for the future of work are the ones that are really uniquely human. We need skills in analytical thinking and innovation. We need creativity. We need critical thinking. We need people who can solve complex problems. And this is, of course, going to be happening in tandem with technologies. So the big question facing all of us right now is how do we instill these in two systems? One, the system for upgrading the skills of those who are already in the labor market. And the second one, how do we actually put that as a benchmark within education systems? Thank you very much.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Vesselina. Okay, it sounds very impressive and a little bit intimidating. How can you react? Especially our sons and grandsons and grandkids are reacting to these new situations. And so let me move on to the next presentation. Francis, I heard you were in New York. It must be midnight. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm actually in Los Angeles.
Okay, good. Please start your presentation.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here and listening to me tonight. My name is Francis Scholl and I will discuss how to unlock workers' full potential. Thank you to the Asian Productivity Organization, the Japanese Productivity Center, for having me tonight. I would like to share with you that I am a practitioner who has invented a model that was actually tested globally on 5 continents across a wide variety of industries and sizes of companies, and across regions in the world as well as culture, very different cultures of organizations. So I will speak to you with the confidence that I've seen enough results based on this model to share it with you in trust that will bring value to each and one of you. So without much more, I will now dive into the subject of unlocking workers' full potential. I will start with the true story of actually a former Unilever marketing executive who was attending one of the seminars I was giving in New York. His name is Philip, and he's a marathon runner. He was a very seasoned marathon runner who had decided once again to run the Manhattan Marathon. And he, as you know, would train over 3 months in preparation of the marathon. And the first 2 months he did great. He trained very well. But the last month he had to travel quite a bit for work. And towards the end of that 3rd month, he felt that he probably was not fully prepared to take on that marathon. So he called his coach, Jennifer, it's a true story, and asked her what he should do, whether he should run or not. And Jennifer's answer was simple. She said to him, listen, Philip, if you have any doubt that you might hurt yourself, I would take that out of my mind, out of your mind, because you're a seasoned runner and you've actually trained quite a bit for this marathon again. So no risk of injury. And my advice to you, having trained you now for a while, would be to go and participate and do 2 things. One, do not look at your watch. Never check time during the entire marathon. And equally so, do pay attention to your breathing throughout the race. So Philip was kind of disconcerted because usually Jennifer gives him metrics and strategies and very, very, very metric-oriented guidelines. But this time it was kind of touchy-feely what she was telling him. So he decided to sleep on it. And the next day, he thought, you know what? I trained. I love running. I love running in Manhattan. So I'll take on the challenge. I'll go there in good trust. I won't hurt myself. And I'm going to try to apply what Jennifer told me. So he did. He did not look at his watch, and he did stay consciously present to his breath, to his breathing. It was not easy because Philip is a strong-willed executive who's used to, strategies, measures, metrics, and monitoring himself, but he did not. He just accepted to be in the moment, connected to his breath, and not looking at his watch. Now, guess what? Guess what happened? he got his best score ever. So here we have two different approaches to performance and productivity. One is a linear approach, which is what he had normally done every time he was running. You know, setting a goal, preparing himself, having a clear strategy for the best outcome. And then he experimented with a non-linear approach, what Jennifer advised him to do. So let's discuss those and let's give them names. Let's say that the linear approach, let's call it the square approach. And the non-linear approach, let's call it circle. Obviously, the linear approach seems to be the most efficient, the safest, the surest to get him to his results. But in this case, actually, it is the circle approach that led him to his best score with less effort, because he didn't hurt himself and he felt good at the end of the race. So he asked me on that seminar, but why is it that I still tend to force my way to productivity at work, even if I kind of know better? And I told him, well, the reason is simple. In organizations, we dominate with square thinking. We control our outcomes through strategies and careful management of resources and so on. And in doing this, we actually limit our ability to adapt, to be creative, to be resilient, and to produce in another way, in the way that got you to get to your best score. So actually, this controlling, domineering square thinking is very limiting when it comes to the additional level of productivity that we need in this very, as you were saying, disruptive world. So let me use an image. Let's say that a parrot, a wild animal that's capable of adapting and being creative in the wild forest, you know, in the tropical forest, resilient and certainly sustainable. Let's symbolize this animal with a circle. Now, let's imagine that this bird has a nest where it goes to repose, to rest, to find stability. And let's say that the nest is the square. Stability, dependability, predictability, always in the same place, always there for the bird to rest. So the simple image is that the bird interacting with the nest, is a good relationship. You know, the bird can come and go, so it's free to roam. So the bird is free, and yet it has a base, it has a foundation, it has a structure to support it. So that's where the parrot is at its best, when the structure is there to support its life. But now, imagine that the nest is turned into a cage. If you put a wild bird in a cage, it loses its ability to sustain itself, to be creative, to be adaptable. It's no longer a wild bird, it's an object of decoration. And that creates a wall of inertia. The bird would be really losing its natural ability to sustain itself, to be creative and adaptable. So when we dominate with the square thinking, with a controlling strategy, we actually create somewhat also a wall of inertia. And we create limits, and it's a wall that's closed on itself. So what I've observed in organization is that we can actually, in spite of processes, in spite of strategies, we can retain the so-called qualities and unleash them and leverage them, just like a free wild parrot that can adapt and create and sustain and increase productivity without running the risk of burnout or hurting oneself. And that's the new approach that I bring to organization, to unleash that human potential, to get that increased productivity. And then you can use the square, you can use the structures, you can use the processes in service of those natural abilities, agility, creativity, resilience, to generate that additional productivity. But as you can see, it's a reversal of perspective. It's a quite different approach than the one that's process-driven, number-driven, strategy-driven. It's a holistic approach that doesn't deny strategy and processes, but reposition them where they belong. Just the same way as the nest is in support of life of the parrots, the structures and processes should be in help, in support of people and culture. Unfortunately, it's very often the opposite. So when we choose to free the circle from the square, we enable that limitless human potential. And we leave it to everyone's autonomy to use that limitless human potential for the purpose of everyone's progress and whatever tasks they have to achieve. So now let's discuss productivity. As I was preparing for this conference, I read, of course, some information, and I saw that productivity had been defined as how to do more with less. And I would challenge this linear thinking of doing more with less, which is very quantitative. And I would say it's an impossible reach, because human performance, of course, involves some level of stress. And you cannot just perform regardless of the level of stress. This is not the way it works. There's actually research that shows that there is a bell curve. In other words, there is a positive correlation between performance and stress, but up to a certain point where when the level of stress becomes too important, then performance decreases.
Yeah.
And that was exemplified and researched and published in the Journal of Management Studies in 2014. There's a tipping point where the correlation moves from being positive to becoming negative. So the reason for this is because the human body is not a machine. This is why square thinking is actually quite detrimental when you want to capitalize on the human potential and you want to increase your access to human potential, which is all the conversation today in this disruptive world, and the constant reskilling, or the more rapid reskilling. So how to do more with less is actually a recipe for burnout. And we know that people talk about the pandemic before the pandemic. It was in the Harvard Business Review. And we know that today the World Health Organization conducted a study recently saying that 1 out of 4 adults will be affected by burnout in their active life, and has a huge cost, to the point that burnout now is listed as one of the global recognized diseases. So where is the opportunity for us to unlock human potential? Well, it's in one word: more engagement at work. We know that unfortunately 8 out of 10 workers are merely showing up at work. In other words, 8 out of 10 workers are either not engaged or poorly engaged when they come to work. It has an enormous cost. It costs us 7 trillion in lost productivity, according to Gallup report in 2019, of a global workplace. And companies that have employees with best level of engagement happen to be 70% more productive and 21% more profitable than companies with the least engaged workforce, according to a Glassdoor survey of 2017, December 6. So we see that there is an opportunity, but engagement, again, we're not engaging machines, we're engaging humans. So we can't approach engagement for a square thinking alone. More engagement comes with better management, better human management, according to a McKinsey study of April 2021 this year. So now, how do we do this? How do we create engagement? Well, we need to unlearn our linear way to productivity. We can't think of how to do more with less. This is not the way human productivity can be leveraged and increased. It's not enough, and it's dangerous. We need to reconnect with our natural abilities, and I would appreciate, I imagine that Japanese audience and Asian audience who revere the importance of nature, as a constant source of inspiration for renewal and happiness and living in life, that it's time to also reconnect with nature within us. When we choose to fit a circle from the square, we enable limitless human potential, as I said, and that's a possibility, that's a choice, that's a leadership choice. It's the ability to not control, to put strategies in place and yet give space for experimentation, give space for empathy, for a sense of purpose, for everything that inspire people to become more. And those are not things that you can put in an equation. That's something that needs to be discussed and be experimented with, that needs to be reckoned with. And then as you build experiences, just like this runner, Philip, who learns something by experimenting different ways, then he can trust himself in new ways of doing that are respecting his body, breathing, staying present, giving up the control of the outcome, and yet performing better than he did. So we can learn a new path to outstanding productivity. It's possible, and that's why I designed this model, Squircle, so that we understand that square and circle, rational thinking and perceptual being can come together and work in synergy for the better of our workforce, of its ability to adapt, to create, to be resilient, and to produce more. But for that, we need to respect nature in us. And I think that's the big lesson that COVID taught us, that we do not have the upper hand. Nature is our only government, and that's for us to be its faithful steward. I call it Squircle performance. It's possible. As I said, I've seen it work. I've helped companies to reinvent business models, turn around businesses that were really failing, and I've done it enough times with great organizations around the world to tell you that it works, and state this to you with confidence, and invite you actually to take a small assessment. It will take you 3 minutes to see how you think yourself, how you balance that synergy between the square and the circle within yourselves, and how you can better understand how you can leverage that circle thinking for yourself and for your teams to unlock human potential in your organizations. On this note, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Francis. Okay, we've got to be squircle. Very exciting new word. Okay, so let me move to Yuka's presentation. Back to Tokyo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I already got a lot of insights from the two presentations, of course, including Toyama-san's one. And then I really realized that we really need to change because the world is changing, and we also need to change, including our mindset. And what I want to present in this 10 minutes from my side is I am HR person, and I've been focusing on organization and human resources for more than 20 years since I was juniors in university. So since then, I have only one policy, very important thing, which is happiness of the person. And then I think my presentation is related to what Francois mentioned very much. So maybe that would be the repetitive a little bit, but let me please explain what I want to. Okay, so when it comes to the investment into human resources, this is my recent thinking, along with, of course, the Unilever, praise. Our company is also known as the good leadership as well as the investment in the human resources, and then that's why I've been here for more than 13 years. And then I enjoy a lot, but I also had experience working in GE as well as the Japanese venture company. So with the experience of being in a little bit different corporations with a different culture, I now realize the 3C model is universal when it comes to thinking about the investment into human resources. So first C is the capacity. So in order for us to increase human resources capacity, we have to downgrade the workload, so lower the workload, overtime and the stress, those kind of things. Of course, it's easy to imagine those kind of things. We all hope that those kind of things will be decreased, okay? That can be happened by DX as well as delegation. Also, in order for us to increase capacity, we can create more spaces with us. And then, as Francois also said, engagement should be increased. That also leads to the increase of the productivity. That can be happen maybe the recent technology and then thinking that agile ways of working, as well as a flexible working that recently in Japan we also say workation, remote work, telework. that was advanced by the impact of the COVID-19. So this is all about the capacity. So when it comes to thinking about investment, the company can do something to downside, slower the workload, overtime, those kind of things, and increase, space engagement, productivity. Also, we have to invest into the people's capability, ability. So skills, experience, development, those should be continuously invested. But my point is not only skill side, technical skills, digital skills, but also being, which is a little bit similar to mindset. So we also need to increase our being side. So looking into inside and then strengthen our inner leadership, those kind of things is very important. And then finally, with those two, capacity, capability, investment, we can create culture. So when it comes to Japanese traditional working culture, I guess there is still seniority there, lifetime employment. Of course, I know it's changing. And then a little bit focusing on weakness. These kind of things should be, I think, decreased. At the same time, we really have to invest on performance-based culture, purpose-driven culture, and also create a psychological safety, and we should really focusing on strength. When I say AI is not the artificial intelligence, I would say appreciative inquiry. So if everyone do appreciative inquiry in every moment, in any working environment, I think culture can be created that would create the environment that the people can create capacity, more capacity and capability. So that's my thinking overall. Then productivity. So what is productivity? This is the theme for this entire conference. And to be honest, I do not like the word of productivity, to be honest, in the sense of Japanese context, seisansei. Everyone say seisansei ageru, which means increase productivity. And then I think it's not right. I will explain why. So we usually focusing on the output, like a new product, quality, quantity, time, money, those kind of things. We tend to scale productivity with those kind of things. But when it comes to thinking about these things, so this is yin-yang, yin-yo, so everything is kind of circle. So this is exactly what the Francois says. We always have both sides. And then when it comes to output, new product, those kind of things, seisansei, productivity, it is always point of view from company. But at the same time, as a leader, we need to think about employee point of view. And then we all know that input will create output. And what kind of input would create our productivity, which is our mindset, health, well-being, motivation, happiness, feeling, emotions, those kind of things. It's those intangible, but surely there. But I think, based on my experience, there are very few leaders who know or who realizes these are the more important thing. So that's why I do intentionally say I don't like the word of productivity. That's why. So input create output, and output goes back to input. But at the corporations, evaluation tend to be done only by the output. So leaders who are listening to all this conference presentation, I really like to say we also need to really take care of every single employee's internal, inside, intangible aspects. That's what I really want to say. So I've been having these kind of ideas since I start working. So therefore, my main theme is always how we can work happily. So work happy is my big thing. And recently, I concluded these three things are more important. Whether the company, the corporation can provide an environment where the people can do flexible working. Is there D&I environment? And also the leaders, managers can surely create psychological safety environment. So these three are really the key. And then just my last chart, I guess, as far as I remember, I would like to give you some data why happiness is important in the workplace. Happiness always thought like, very childish or girly or those kind of things. But it is never like that. If you have happiness in workplace, you can see these kind of results. This is based on the research. So if people are happier, innovation will be 300% up. If someone is happier, he or she is 45% more adaptable to change. This is quite important in this very, very, very VUCA world, right? And then 37% increase of the sales, results, and also productivity. It says 21%, but the recent research also said 30% or even 31%, okay? So you can also see the other data like this chart. So what I want to say is happiness is very important. So that's why I pointed out the things in pink here: mindset, health, well-being, motivation, happiness, feeling, those kind of things. I really would like to say we should invest in those things. So that's what I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yuka. It's very, very, practically very instructive to me. Actually, we already have many, many great questions, but let me say a little bit about the basic challenge or potential conflict or possibly synergy between people's happiness and technology innovation. A little bit related to the first presentation from Vesselina. The story reminds me of my past experience at the company called Omron. I used to be a board member of the Omron for 10 years. And the last Tokyo Olympic Games, that was 57 years ago, there was a very famous story about the Omron and Paralympic. Actually, that was the first Paralympic happening in Japan 57 years ago, and that was led by Dr. Nakamura. He is a very famous guy for the those kind of handicap movement. And he led the Paralympics, and actually Omron was the first big sponsor to him. And Omron is a company who specializes in the automation technology. And the founder of Omron, Mr. Tadeishi, he believed the automation technology will help the handicapped people to equally work with other people. And that contributes to the happiness of the people. And on the other hand, already from those days, some people say the automation will destroy the employment. It's bad for the many, many people. It get rid of the jobs. But Mr. Tadeishi strongly believed this is good for the people, obviously. And 50 years from now, it seems to me that Tadeishi-san was right, very right. Omron created many, many new jobs, and automation technology created new type of jobs. I'm not sure that's why, because of the education, or I'm not sure, but anyway, the innovation created the new, horizon of the human being's capability. It related to the, the presentation from Francis. So the question is, my question is that technology or digital innovation or whatever, disruptive innovation, can be, can contribute to the well-being of the human people in the future. And if we try to do that, what is the key role of the company or possibly of the government or other institutions like universities or institutions like World Economic Forums or whatever? So do you have any ideas or opinions or views over that? So please start from the Vesselina.
Indeed, there are many opportunities for technologies to help us create a better future for work and one good example is if you think of why are non-humanoid robots increasing in relevance. It's because they're being used in underwater drilling. They're being used in mines. They're being used in very dangerous and hazardous environments instead of putting human lives at risk. If you think of your daily, most routine, most boring tasks, and think about how that might actually be done more smoothly by a process that this has no emotion attached to it, that doesn't feel that this is a tedious and unworthy task to them. That's something that that technology can bring about, and that's really the benefit to day-to-day work. But it does require some adaptation. Not everybody is skilled with digital tools.
Sure.
Not all of us understand these different processes. So the big role really for companies and governments is to work out how to infuse that training environment that will support workers who do need to upgrade their skills. And many businesses do actually think that that's something that they can do organically within their enterprise. 2 in 3 tell us that they get a return on investment on training they conduct themselves within a year, and that they're doing this from within their enterprise. So they actually have a learning officer, they have a curricula, they have a process for doing so. But the speed at which this must be done and the scale at which this must be done means we need wider partnerships to make this happen. We need an exchange of what is the best practice to make that a reality. This is something we have started creating as part of our Skilling Revolution platform. It was launched in our 50th anniversary last year, and we've been very lucky to have many leading businesses and governments join in to kind of huddle in and understand what are the best approaches to scaling reskilling programs. But in parallel, there are a range of workers for whom government is really going to have to take much larger responsibility, in particular those who require very holistic, extensive reskilling and who might have dropped out of the labor market in the current context.
Do you have any views or the opinions about the political approach, like a basic income or that kind of things?
It's been interesting to see that work happen and the experimentation underway.
Sure.
We've had some very good pilots. They're still inconclusive for the most part, and they still haven't fully addressed the role that work and labor actually has in people's identity and sense of purpose. But of course, within the kind of limits of the amount of work that is reasonable and doable for a person.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, Francis, any views or opinions?
So I was listening to you, and I have to apologize. I have a little bit of a sore throat since yesterday. But you know, I was reading the skills that were needed, and one of them was complex problem solving. I think there's another one that's also important neighbor to this, that is complex decision making. Because as much as machines are coming to the rescue of us, at the end we are the one inventing them and using them. So we are the ultimate decision makers. And I think that complex decision making is probably the big one here. And we're not used to it. I was never told how to make a decision, and I went to school for 2 years.
Sure.
Including one of the best business in Europe. I was never told how to I see how decisions are made in organizations. It's not to being a framework. I apologize. Yuka and Shimada was saying we look at outputs and we don't focus on the process. And understanding the process that leads to the result, whether it's a failure or a success, is a learning in itself. So I would say complex decision-making is a very important factor. The second thing that I've heard from Koreans at global organizations is the new mindset is business skill set, which I think is interesting. President of EY in the United States was saying that she wished she had known when she was in her early 20s entering the marketplace, the job market. But the one thing that she would need forever was adaptability. More than knowledge, more than any other skill. And that's the message that she would have for the new generation.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, your presentation gave me some inspiration that, I mean, really linear thoughts, your word, it tend to be a more kind of trade-off. I mean, innovation, automation might destroy the jobs, but the circle, or spiral thoughts, it might be more creative solution we might get, because new technology or innovation may create new type of jobs and type of the happiness and new types of well-beings, right?
I fully agree. It's incredible when you approach the human workforce from this circle perspective. Okay, what gets manifested? What gets manifested? I get deeply amazed, and I build my faith in the future of humanity, because there's so much potential that can be unleashed and released beyond any division that you can imagine in any organization. There's a way through a complex situation. This is quite remarkable.
Sure. Thank you. Yuka-san, please. Same question.
Yes, that same question.
Technology and innovation and human being.
Yes, my answer is a big yes. Yes, technology, DX, AI, those kind of things will contribute to our well-being. That's because I think by having the technology, human being can only focus on what we can do.
Yeah, at this moment.
Yeah, and then also this also allow us to use our energy and time on what we really want to do. So that's why basically I think technology will contribute to us. However, for those who are now doing those jobs, that will be replaced by digitals or technology.
Yes.
Or those who have the great passion and happiness with doing those kind of jobs. Those people will not be happy. So therefore, as also Francois said, adaptability will be very necessary. Although their work will be replaceable, however, people who can take it as a chance, not a fear.
Sure.
Take a chance and then do change the focus or do new things or reskilling, those kind of things. So I really think adaptability is really the key. So as you see in my data, happier person has a higher adaptability. And also this reminds me of one model. There is a model called HERO, HERO model, HERO. So this is meaning the hope. People who have hope, H. People who have efficacy, E. People who have resilience, and also people who have optimism. So people who have this HERO, aspect, those people would tend to have the better life and then happier life. So they're that model. So if a people is like a hero type of person, I think even in something happens with the jobs, with the employment, the happiness will be there.
Sure. Actually, it seems to me that it's a matter of the human wisdom, whether those technology can be limit the human being's capability, or it might, enlarge our frontiers. Okay, thank you very much. Next questions. A little bit practical questions related to the audience question is that each company, now the company has to invest into the human resource. Everybody agrees with that. But on the other hand, the investment is a sort of cost. And so those investment gonna be, built into each people, each employees. And they might change job. Right, so that there's a sort of dilemma that here because we have the constitutional right to change the job. So how do you manage that dilemma? I mean, one way we can think anyway, this is a sort of the human resource. The value of the human asset is a public commons. So it's investment onto the people is good for the company, but also it's good for the society as a whole. So why don't you hesitate to invest? The other view is, if people leave this company, those our investment are going to be stolen by other companies. So why don't we limit the investment to the company unique skills, not universal skills? At least it seems to me that many Japanese company has been thinking the second way.
Oh.
Because they very much stress up on the OJT rather than sending those people the MBAs or that kind of things. So how do you manage this dilemma, or how do you think about this thought? Maybe this should start from the Yuka-san.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting question. And then what I say firstly is it's totally up to the leaders of the company how the leader wants to do with his or her corporations. What kind of visions, what kind of purpose the leader has, and then reflect into his or her organization. So if this leader think about like the second way, so investment is a cost, and then people may leave, so that investment is in vain, so we do not have to do that.
Narrow-minded guy.
And that comes from, the action comes from fear, basically. So fear-based action will not make something happen. So I really like to say the leaders, the action, thinking comes from, I think, hope, not the fear, but hope. So negatively based thinking will be realized in many ways in organization. So I would like to say, first thing is how the being of leader will be like. But the second, of course, there is always a dilemma. There are so many cases I experienced. Invest in some, good quality,
I have to.
top talent, top talent. But the next day, he or she say, I move, I go. Of course, it's a pity, but at the same time, I always talk this to my leaders and then, previous leaders that it is it is our responsibility whether we can really keep and retain them in the organization by providing the chances, opportunities, and then the person feel the more higher engagement or not. So that is our responsibility as a management. So there is always many ways that we can make the employees feel high engagement.
Sure.
So what management should do is always do many things and then try to make people feel, I'm cared. There is an opportunity. There is a chance to grow. And then if we really can do that, I think, even though there is some investment is gone, I think as Toyama-san said, in the end, that will be the contribution to the society, and that would come back to the company.
In some way.
That's my thinking.
It's quite sure those really good, talented people don't want to work for that kind of narrow-minded company. Anyway, so in US, you have much higher, employment, or workers' liquidity. So how do you think this dilemma, Francis?
No, it's true. Thank you. It was clear to me that I was hearing a cultural difference, in the question compared to the US market. But I would echo what Yuka-san just said. There is fear-based behaviors and there is what's purpose-driven behavior. And you need to see the highway today. The competition is so high, and the thing that we're saying, there's a real shortage, of course. So the competition is going to be fierce. So you need to raise your standard. You can't minimize the investment. It's not a cost, it's an investment. It's investment in your culture, it's investment into your business model.
Yeah.
and the whole move towards stakeholder capitalism
Yes.
require to have a sense of purpose, and that sense of purpose requires to have a workforce that can support it and adapt within it and constantly reinvent. So the same way as you pay your employees, you have to train your employees, and so that's a non-negotiable in the United States at least.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, so Vesselina, may I have there is a question about the poverty in the world, and now as you said, now some proportion of the job might be disappear. It might cause the potential inequality problems and poverty problems, and there are many, emerging countries and developing countries. There are many poor people still. So maybe this is another big agenda for the World Economic Forum. So how do you have any comments or opinions about those poverty things under this kind of new innovation era?
Essentially, we are at risk of seeing this polarization between economies on the macro level, but also within different kinds of jobs and then professions, and then trickling down to income levels. The most resilient way to step forward on this is to think about the investing in the sectors that will create economic growth and job growth at the same time. And making sure that the jobs created are good jobs with decent standards and decent wages.
Sure.
And we know that's what lifts people out of poverty. We know that's the path to prosperity. And that there is an evaluation that needs to be made around making sure that can happen. And then if you think of those workers who are, and those in the population who might not be workers right now, who are out of work, who might be missing the skills to capture those opportunities, we need to find new ways to reach them and not just give up on them. I think we're very often in danger of assuming they're the high skilled and the low skilled, and the low skilled often fall out of the system. We need to refresh our hope that everybody can grow and develop beyond the kind of initial investment we make, no matter what their early journey has been, that we can actually have everybody be able to contribute productively to our economies and societies. And we need to actually have a fundamental belief this can happen and invest in it.
Okay, so who should be the, back to the investment onto the human capital, right? And so who should be the main investor for those, average or poor people, human capital development? Company or government or international, organizations? How do you think?
There are different sorts of strategies that governments and businesses can take. In a business, that might pragmatically look like in your HR department, when you receive curriculum vitae of people who have taken non-standard paths, who maybe weren't the highest achievers in their class to date, but still have core skills and potential, and they have maybe completed new skilling, consider those individuals for roles. Give them high quality, decent jobs, give them a progression path. So we need to step out of judging on the basis of whatever was achieved early in life and start to actually thinking with our whole population. So that's a very clear business strategy to take. Another aspect of this is thinking about your workers who are maybe the lower end of your workplace. We tend to invest in the higher end of the workplace. We tend to invest in what we call high potentials. But you should be investing in everybody. And if you don't carry everyone on board in your company, you're actually missing out a whole part of the potential value creation of your company. The other aspect from government is very clearly having the social safety nets to actually look after those who have fallen between the cracks, who maybe experienced hardship, and also having those reskilling and upskilling system working for the adult population. And so few companies have done this well. So few countries have done this well, but we can get there. There needs to be a massive investment in lifelong learning that is also sponsored by having that system of investment in skills, in training, in meeting the rising demand in the labor market. And that's going to clearly have clear dividends for companies as well, because that talent shortage is not going away very easily otherwise.
Sure, sure. Do you think the current ESG movement, where the investor side will put the pressure onto the companies to invest onto those more social matters, including the human capital investment onto those other developing countries? How do you think about this movement?
We're already seeing that parts of this are putting more emphasis on training. Of course, amongst the ESG metrics that have been released, and some of them harmonized in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, we've been able to see training and investment in reskilling as a key ESG metric. But there's also increased movement to make sure the social aspect of those metrics is very clear. And that is certainly going to have to do with inclusion. It's certainly going to have to do with bringing on board more people in transformations and transitions. And we are seeing that investors are very interested in investing in companies that have that vision of what's good for society, what's good for the environment, and what sound governance looks like.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the last question to Francis. As I discussed at the beginning, many people are working at the SMEs, small companies. Right. And maybe similar to the last question, how can we bring the fruit or outcome or benefit of the innovation and new technology and such as AI, whatever, to the SMEs, and especially people who are working at the SMEs? Do you have any ideas or views? Anybody? The first from the Francis.
Sure, thank you. So research shows clearly that innovation is really more a question of implementation than a question of ideation. Especially in an open source world where there's so much information available. The real challenge is to get the innovative solution through the pipeline. And because that requires behavioral change.
Sure.
So that's, first of all, understanding this is already putting you ahead of ahead of the innovation game or the innovation challenge. The second thing that we recommend our clients to do is to make sure that everybody understands that they can contribute to the process of innovation. Because as soon as you disenfranchise a group, that group will have much more inertia when it comes to implementing the solution. So you want to make sure, and that's a true fact, everybody can contribute to the process of innovation, depending on which angle you take of innovation, but everybody can contribute.
So you mean the company size doesn't matter?
Sorry?
You mean the company size doesn't matter in that sense, right?
No. Listen, I started my career in a small business, and I can tell you, a front desk person, there was a front desk person at the time, picking up the phone and dispatching the calls to different employees.
Yes.
She observed so many things. She had so much information. So I would spend time with her. I would go in for a coffee and say, okay, let's spend some time, because she saw things I would never see. So she had information, and she had something to contribute that I was not aware of. Okay, and nobody was really spending much time with her, and she felt valued, etc., etc. Okay, so everybody can contribute, and everybody should contribute. That's the other part, because there is no innovation without diversity.
Yeah.
And in corporations, the people who are gravitating towards innovation are the creative types, are the envisioners, but that's not enough. You don't want dreamers only. You need to get things to happen. You need to calibrate innovation. You need to make sure that innovation fits, the compliance, the budget, the timeline, the resources, and so on and so forth. So, innovation is a big word that has lots of facets. And I think the big message is it's going to be really about implementing it. You need to bring everybody on board and get everybody to understand that not only they can, but they should contribute to the process of innovation, because we need their different perspectives. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Any comments from the Yuka-san or Vesselina?
Just a
Yes,
simple one
okay, sure.
about the innovation with the small mid-sized corporations. I truly think ideation is really the key, and then I'm always thinking about how we can expand the opportunity on the part of employees who can bring ideas, who can come up with ideas, and then that is maybe one thing is that the company can provide an opportunity for each single employees to meet with totally different people and then to work from a little bit different places. So change the ordinary way. And that will actually gives the good stimulus to our brain. So that is also research understand. So therefore, what company can do is give them the freedom. So that's my answer.
Okay, good, wonderful. Any comments, Vesselina?
It's already very well covered by Francis.
Okay.
It's a fantastic set of outsights already.
Good. Okay, so it seems to me that time is running up. Many great discussions, and I got really wonderful inspiration from your comments. I am a sort of a turnaround specialist of the company, and always the typical dilemma we face is that people, is that whether there's a liability or cost or asset or source of the value. And in the long run, or especially at this time of the innovation and knowledge-intensive era, it's becoming more on the side of the asset and the value generators. But the question is that we need more investment, and the investment should be more inclusive and more diverse. So that's the real challenge we are facing. And not just company, but as a whole society and all over the world. So that is really the challenge. And human creates the technology, but the technology now challenges us, our human wisdom. So this human capital things will be even more and more important, and we are now tested. Our knowledge, our true knowledge or wisdom is now tested now. So thank you very much, great panels. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much too.
So now give this microphone back to MC.
Thank you, Mr. Toyama and the speakers for an excellent session. I think we have a lot of new things to think about when it comes to human capital and workforce development. We would now like to announce a 10-minute break in the proceedings. So in approximately 10 minutes, we will continue on to the next session. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the short break and are energized and ready for the next session. This session will be on the topic of smart transformation, co-creating the future through innovation for sustainable value-added creation. The presentations and discussions in this session concern the role of digital technology and how it can best be leveraged to add value to the economy and society and support continued innovation and productivity growth. I would like to introduce our moderators and the speakers for this session. Unfortunately, Dr. Yuka Matsuo is unable to join us today, and in his stead, the moderator for this session will be Dr. Rikuri Yamato. He is a medical doctor from the professional staff at Matzo Lab in the University of Tokyo. Thank you, Dr. Yamato, for joining us today. Our first speaker in this session is Dr. Katsuya Yama, a representative director of Paksha Technology. He obtained a BA, MA, and PhD from the University of Tokyo, Japan, specializing in machine learning and technology management for innovation. He founded Paksha Technology in 2012 with a focus on algorithm-based solutions for enterprises, including image and voice recognition, natural language processing, and predictive modeling. Now Paksha has grown to a listed company on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, supporting industry leaders in Japan. Prior to this venture, Dr. Yama worked for the Boston Consulting Group, and as an assistant professor at the University of Tokyo. In 2020, he was selected by the World Economic Forum as one of its young global leaders. Our last speaker for this session is Minister Audrey Tang. She's a civic hacker and digital minister for the Republic of China, known for revitalizing the computer languages Perl and Haskell, as well as building the online spreadsheet system EtherCalc in collaboration with Dan Bricklin. In the public sector, Minister Tang served on the National Development Council's Open Data Committee and in the K-12 Curriculum Committee, and led the first e-rulemaking project in the ROC. In the private sector, she has worked as a consultant with Apple on computational linguistics and Oxford University Press on crowd lexicography, and with social text on social interaction design. In the third sector, Minister Tang contributed to the ROC's GovZero, a vibrant community focusing on creating tools for civil society with a call to fork the government. Before the start of this session, I'd like to announce again that anyone viewing can pose questions to Dr. Yamato and Dr. Ueno Yama on Zoom webinar. If time permits, some of these questions may be addressed by the moderator. I would like to welcome all the speakers and the moderator to join us on stage or to connect with us virtually and kick off the session. Dr. Yamato, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Rikuri Yamato, staff at Matzo Laboratory, the University of Tokyo. As MC said, today Dr. Matsuo has gotten sick, so I will be able to give a speech in his place. I apologize to all those who are looking forward to his speech. However, what I'm about to speak is what Dr. Matsuo was originally going to speak, so I hope you will take it as his words. Okay, in my talk today, I would like to briefly describe the current state of AI, our efforts to bring about innovation, and what we need to do in the future. As many of you know, artificial intelligence, especially the technology called deep learning, has been making rapid progress. 2020 saw a huge performance leap in image recognition, and many of you may remember AlphaGo beating ECEDO in 2016. After that, deep learning has been making great progress in natural language processing technology since about 2018, and has already reached a point where it surpassed human performance in the group benchmark. The rapid development of natural language processing was triggered by the famous "Attention is all you need" paper, which proposed a mechanism called transformers. The diagram below shows a transformer. It may seem very complicated, but it's very familiar to us in our field. The transformer is a different method from the traditional CNN and RNN methods, and it is used in almost all natural language processing nowadays. In July 2020, GPT-3, a huge model using transformers, was released by OpenAI with a limited API, which caused a lot of buzz. For example, this article was very popular, but it was not written by a human. It was revealed at the end that it was written by GPT-3. GPT-3 used a huge amount of data and a huge model for pre-training, making it possible to run for a variety of tasks with very little data. One impressive demonstration is the automatic generation of programs. Normally, in translation, for example, when translating from English to Japanese, the English sentence is the input, and the Japanese sentence is the output. In this demo, however, the translation can be done with the English sentence as the input and the program language as the output. In other words, it is an automatic program generation. GPT-3 was created by OpenAI, but then it was announced that Microsoft would be the exclusive licensee. And just recently at the Microsoft Developer Conference, a tool was announced that uses GPT-3 to translate natural language sentences into PowerFX language code. Perhaps these large-scale language models will change the way we live and work. This is because much of our work is verbal work, and verbal communication is also an important part of our lives. How will our work and life change when the technology of natural language processing makes a great technological leap forward? I would like to think about this with you. And there is one more important technological development that I would like to share with you. This relates to the representation of various scenes and objects. Traditionally, an image of a scene is represented by pixels. So when you zoomed in, the dots looked rough. For your information in 2D, it is called pixels, but in 3D, it is called voxels. And LiDAR, which is used in self-driving vehicles, uses reflected light from a laser to represent objects. This is called a point cloud because it is represented by points. Conventional representations of objects have been limited to such methods. However, a method called NARF was proposed last year and has attracted a lot of attention, and many follow-up papers have been published. NARF represents a scene as a function. What does it mean to represent a scene as a function? Given a special position, x, y, z, if it is inside the object, it is 1. And if it is outside the object, it is 0. So if you put x, y, z, you can represent the object by returning 1 or 0. This is what it means to represent something by a function. Since neural networks are capable of representing very complex nonlinear functions, it is possible to learn to represent things as functions using many images. To be more precise, in NERF, if you look at a certain direction from the x, y, and z positions, what R, G, and B colors will be returned. This is expressed as a function. This technology may be difficult to understand just by hearing about it, but since it will fundamentally change the way images are represented, it may actually have an impact on a great many industries. In fact, it could have an impact on many industries, including the content industry and the manufacturing industry related to images. These are just examples of the latest AI technologies, but the field of artificial intelligence is one where these things are happening at an ever-evolving pace. We don't hear the word AI as much as we used to, and we hear the word DX more and more in Japan. But the evolution of AI technology is unstoppable. Now next, I would like to introduce some of our efforts. In our laboratory, which is called Matzo Laboratory, we not only do basic research on artificial intelligence, but also conduct large-scale education, applied research with companies, and foster startups. The goal is to create an innovation ecosystem in Japan, similar to Silicon Valley and Shenzhen. Dr. Matzo spent 2 years as a visiting researcher at Stanford, and he was truly impressed by the system where industry and academia work together to create innovation. In Japan, there are many large companies with long histories, but not enough new startups. We would like to create such a system to generate innovation in Japan. The first thing we did to achieve this was education. Since it seems certain that deep learning technology would rapidly advance and have a huge impact on society, we created a deep learning course at the University of Tokyo as early as 2015. Together with the data science course, more than 6,000 students and professionals have already taken this course. Students who learn new technologies quickly begin to choose to start their own startups rather than join large corporations. Many startups have emerged from Matzo Laboratory. One of the big success stories is Parksha Technology, founded by Dr. Uenoyama, who will talk next. Dr. Uenoyama received his PhD from Matzo Labo, and Parksha went public in 2017 and has been growing steadily. Another example is the news app Gunosy, whose founder was also from Matzo Labo, which went public in 2015. Following the example of their seniors, many juniors have started their own startups and were working hard every day to improve their technology and grow their businesses. Each of them has different technologies and business fields, but all of them were growing rapidly. In addition, many new startups are being born from the University of Tokyo. The University of Tokyo had a new president in April, and the new president, Professor Fujii, has announced that the University of Tokyo will focus on fostering such startups. The Japan Deep Learning Association, JDLA, of which Dr. Matsuo are the president, is also working on human resource development. JDLA have created a certification system to guide the study of deep learning. And the number of people taking this certification is rapidly increasing. More than 50,000 people have already taken this exam. In addition, Japan has a unique system of colleges of technology called Kosen, where students spend 5 years from the age of 15, the same age as when they enter high school, learning engineer skills. Kosen students are highly skilled and have been supporting the technology of Japan's manufacturing industry. JDLA teaches them deep learning, and we set up a contest where they compete in projects that combine deep learning and manufacturing. There is Kosen in almost every prefecture in Japan, so I hope that Kosen students will be able to create innovations according to the characteristics and challenges of each region. Here are just a few examples from contests. Number one is a system that uses deep learning to read and digitize analog meters. And number two is a system that uses AI to adjust irrigation to increase sugar content by measuring water stress based on images of leaves in orange cultivation. Number three, Tendark, is a system that summarizes and prints in Braille for the visually impaired. Number four, Dion, is a device that can detect abnormalities simply by attaching it to a hammer. As you can see, there are many ways to solve problems using AI or digital technology in various parts of our society. It is no fun to just be pessimistic about the declining birth rate and aging population. There are opportunities everywhere, and we believe that we can use AI to make our society better. So what can we do to make that happen? What the government should do is simple. It is to empower young people and new technologies. Empowerment does not mean forcing them to do a job or make them obedient in exchange for some resource. It means not getting in their way. Expect young people and new technologies and create an environment that allows them to grow naturally, and don't do anything strange, anything wrong. Young people are always excellent, and they will create a new era. All you have to do is to create an environment, have expectations, trust, and wait patiently. Industry needs to take advantage of AI and DX in a hurry. The bottleneck in this process can be the technical literacy of the managers themselves. In particular, managers of large companies with a long history, such as those in Japan, need to learn more about technology. We think it is important to experience programming and to touch data processing and AI algorithms. It does not mean that they have to be a programmer. Of course, they are very busy. However, we think it would be great if the managers themselves would take the time to experience it for themselves. What should academia do? Universities and research institutions need to be aware of their role in society and the value chain. It is important to properly provide the education that is necessary in this age. It is also necessary to take a more societal perspective on the possibilities of using technologies and to communicate this to society. At the same time, we need to be aware of the fact that basic research is the fundamental source of value in the first place, and we should never stop doing basic research based on intellectual curiosity. These are our thoughts, and I look forward to discussing what we can do and what kind of society we want to create. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, so next, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Uenoyama, CEO of Parkshire Technologies. Mr. Uenoyama, please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to speaking to you today. Okay, please open that. Yeah. My name is Katsuya Yama, and I'm CEO of Parkshire Technologies. We offer algorithmic solutions that allow enterprises to renew relationships with their customers. The internet, software, and machine learning technology are changing the world, but there still remains a large gap where digital technology has not been leveraged enough to provide values to societies. Today, I would like to introduce the world of algorithms and how they empower humanity. First, I will introduce Parkshire Technology and show you an analysis of the population and working shortage landscape by industries in Japan. Then I will show you 2 case studies involving crime detection for fraud and AI conversations for customer support and their implications. So I would like to start by introducing Parkshire. At our core, we develop business as an algorithm factory that creates algorithms to make devices intelligent. We offer multiple functional specific algorithm modules, which include machine learning algorithms like image or sound recognition and natural language processing for enterprise operation and software. We mainly deal with 3 areas: mobile computing, imaging devices, and embedded AI. We started in 2012, have over 250 employees, and we are based in Tokyo, Japan. We supply algorithms to more than 1,000 companies in Japan. Here are some of our clients. Our clients come from a range of industries, from telecommunication, finance, to automobile manufacturing. They include many blue-chip companies such as Toyota, Docomo, and the Tokyo Marine Insurance Group, to name a few. At Parkshire, we do business in Japan, so I would like to show you the market landscape and why developing algorithms is crucial in this market. First, as you can see, here is a chart showing a population pyramid of Japan on the left and the world on the right. It should be very clear that Japan is an aging society. The average age will reach 50 in a couple of years. On the other hand, globally, more than 50% of the population will under 30, and they are the so-called digital natives. This means that Japan is the only developed country where the average digital literacy rate is not increasing. This situation is further deepened in Japan as big data, the internet, and digitalization take hold and penetrate in the roots of all economies. In fact, many other developed countries may face a similar situation to Japan's in the near future. Secondly, we face the labor shortage in various industries. Our analysis revealed some interesting findings. First, there is a supply-demand gap. Especially face-to-face jobs, such as retail, hospitality, and restaurant, require workers, but the supply of available workforce is declining. All of these jobs are also characterized by omotenashi, or great customer service, which is an important trail of Japanese culture. Due to omotenashi, it is one of the most difficult types of jobs to replace with algorithms. Next, due to Japan's aging society, there is an enormous need for nursing care services and social welfare professionals. This is one of the biggest targets where algorithms can empower human productivity. Lastly, there is a gap between the job people want and available jobs. For instance, many people are seeking creative jobs in art, design, and photography. However, the number of jobs available don't meet the demand. Another area, new creatives such as YouTubers, where is the same situation exists. This fact implies and questions, what is a person's well-being in the post-information era? Thus, we believe the development of algorithms and their implementation into human operation will ease the shortage of the human labor force. In addition, we believe that the development of algorithms can and will empower not only the human workforce, but also humanity itself. This is why we are developing algorithms in various industries in order to boost productivity in Japan. When we look at algorithms and humans at Berkshire, we always ask questions. How do algorithms impact our lives and productivities? What should be the proper relationship between humans and algorithms in the future? Our motivation is how to embed algorithms in the proper shape to foster a positive relationship between humans and algorithms. Many people may ask, are algorithms a threat to humans? Will algorithms just replace the human workforce? I don't believe so. We don't need to look at it from such a dystopian view. From now, I would like to show you 2 case studies through our business. I hope these cases can show you that a more positive future and relationship between humans and algorithms exist and are possible. Let's start by looking at our first case for crime detection. A major issue that almost all people have dealt with or heard of is the fraudulent use of credit cards and insurance claim processes. Traditionally, humans tried to detect fraud through a rule-based approach, which didn't work. Essentially, we used subjective judgment in determining if a transaction was lawful or not. It was natural that this approach failed, since hackers used the power of technology, while humans didn't. A solution to fighting this type of crime was our use of an algorithmic approach to detect and stop fraud. With the use of our algorithms, even if a hacker changes their method of attack, we could easily change parameters and detect fraudulent transactions. As of today, our algorithm is running successfully with total transaction processes of over 15 trillion yen. I believe the implication in this first case is that algorithms are superior to humans in specific fields and offer a higher degree of productivity. Both humans and algorithms recognize some patterns from input data from sight or sound, for instance, but both have pro and con. Here are some differences in perception between humans and algorithms. Humans have 2 eyes with a limited scope, but algorithms can easily focus on multiple points simultaneously and have a wider scope. Another important difference is the operational time frame. This time frame for humans are seconds and minutes, so humans can easily catch a ball at the age of 5. But algorithms exist much longer and shorter time frames that humans can never do. What is the implication of these differences? I think humans and algorithms live in different time frames with different visibility, which results in a much different type of scope. Algorithms focus on all points and serve very broad areas. That is the reason why our fraud algorithm is working well, and that's successful. At the same time, I believe this also provides a huge potential for collaboration between humans and algorithms. If humans collaborate with algorithms in a proper way, we will also be able to handle large social issues, such as environmental problems, that we can't handle today. This seems just a possibility, but we believe this is the future of algorithms, and it means a great chance for collaboration. Next, let's move into our second case with partial conversational AI for customer support. These days, human-like algorithms have been spreading. They recognize images and sound and have conversations with humans. Especially in customer support field, automation bots work every day and contribute to increasing productivity. Japan is very well known for its world-class customer services based on omotenashi, and this is continuing through the use of algorithms in customer support. So how is it happening here? At first, we thought algorithms would just automate and subtitle for human operations, but the reality is different. Algorithms have proven to empower human productivity and empower the human operations. Especially through the use of voice bots, algorithms can pre-hear the needs and complaints of a customer to provide valuable and time-saving answers before a human operator begins to speak. This brings a new type of collaboration between algorithms and humans. Algorithms empower humans' omotenashi power, and customer support has changed to omotenashi as a service. We call this architecture digital centauros, where humans have been empowered by algorithms. As voice bots become more widespread, this area of the development will only increase further. Our second finding in this case is that algorithms can make smoother human communication. As algorithms not only recognize human emotion, but also quantify their emotion. A human operator can easily identify emotions of a caller prior to talking a call and giving live support. This is a great breakthrough, as we have found that pre-hearing emotions reduces anger, leading to a more positive user experience. As a result, positive emotion will increase, while negative emotions will decrease. We believe this will have huge potential for algorithms in the future. As you know, it's difficult to communicate our full intentions and emotions in non-face-to-face communication environments, such as texting via Twitter. But if we design the right algorithm between humans properly, algorithm can empower humanity and increase meanings while capturing our emotions. We are very excited about these avenues in the future of algorithms. Algorithms don't manipulate humanity, but empower it. I hope these two case studies have shown you the power of algorithms and human working together. We believe the future is bright, and we can build a proper relationship between algorithms and humans. And that is the future of productivity. Algorithms are not against humans. Algorithms are collaborator, a motivator, and a partner. Thank you for your time today.
Okay, Dr. Uenoyama, thank you for a great speech. So next is a video speech by Digital Minister Audrey Tang in Republic of China.
Hello, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's Digital Minister in charge of social innovation. Really happy to be here virtually to share with you some thoughts around digital transformation and how public-private partnerships can help countering the pandemic. Last year, in 2020, on the first day of the year, we began the health inspections for all flight passengers coming in from Wuhan to Taiwan. And as the first values about the R value, the basic reproduction rate of the new virus began trickling in, at the end of January that year, a couple of epidemiologists, Professor Fang Cui-tai and Chen Yixuan, gave a presentation to our cabinet office. They calculated a numeric model that showed definitely if 3/4 of people wear the mask and wash their hands across all the different districts and all the different townships, then we will not need to go into a lockdown. However, if less than that number of people have access to masks, then it's inevitable that we will face community spread. Because of this very clear 75% shared value, shared goal, we began an innovation process that began with the government technologists. In Taiwan, we have universal broadband and universal healthcare. So the pharmacists, most of them, more than 90%, have a very quick fiber optic connection back to the National Healthcare Insurance Agency. And because of this, we immediately thought that we can ration out the mask produced this way on the pharmacies based on what the community have already trusted. The reason why we did not go with, say, mobile payment or other electronic payment to ration the mask is because we know in the more rural or remote places, not everyone have the habit of using such mobile payments. And because of that, we will probably face pockets that less than 3/4 of people have access to mask, and therefore we chose the way that has universal inclusion. So inclusion is the most important value in the beginning of digital transformation. Just as we are rolling out the GovTech project, people in the civil society, the social sector people, such as Howard Wu and Finjan Kiang here, they also wrote their own maps. In the Tainan city, they have visualized all the different stores, whether some of them still have masks, whether some of them run out of masks. They use a crowdsourced platform to ask people to contribute so that people do not have to queue in vain. And because in Taiwan, the civic tech community is very well connected to the cabinet office, so I immediately took their idea and asked the premier, saying that we need to support the people, trust them with open data. And when open data is updated in real time, we call it an open ABI. So on the beginning of February, they got the access to all the 6,000 pharmacies, and every 30 seconds, it's updated on their map, which pharmacies still have some masks available and which have just run out of masks, and down to the individual pieces of masks sold. But at the same time, the pharmacists are also doing their own social innovation. Many pharmacists handed out those numbered cards saying instead of swiping the IC card for national health care during the queue, they would ask people who queue in the morning to just deposit the IC card in the pharmacy in exchange of a small number. And then with that numbered card, they can go back in the evening when the queue is no longer there, and they can redeem the mask ration as well as their IC card. Now, individually, this social innovation by the pharmacists could reduce queuing very effectively. Individually, the mask map can avoid needless queuing to the pharmacies that have run out of masks. But these two together, created a lot of explosive externalities, much like Mentos and Coca-Cola, so much so that a nearby pharmacy near my residence put a very large banner in the front window saying, "Don't trust the app!" exclamation mark. And why is that? Because if a pharmacy hand out the numbers, then on the mask map, it's as if they have not sold anything because it only counts the national IC card swipes. And so during the lunch break, they would sell everything on the map, it looks like, and people would call and complain that why are they not selling all the masks in the morning? Why do they tell the people who show up with the mask map at hand that they have run out of masks when they show so clearly that on the map app that they have still some masks left? And so to resolve this situation, we cannot take one side over the other. We cannot tell the pharmacists to stop handing those numbered cards. We can't tell the mask map makers to stop updating every 30 seconds. Instead, we ask the pharmacists what to do. And after a couple weeks of co-creation, we eventually settled on a button. If they click the button, they can disappear from the map for the day. And so it's like a cloaking device. And so the moral of this co-development is that mutual trust relies on taking all the sides. Instead of choosing one side over the other, we need to engage in multi-stakeholder conversations. Actually, we had such a conversation back in 2017 with the tax filing experience. Zhuo Zhiyuan, a service designer, petitioned at the time saying the tax filing experience is explosively hostile to the citizens, and it was indeed the case. But instead of defending our policy, we simply said, okay, it's everyone's business with everyone's help. Anyone who complain about tax filing get to co-create the 2018, the next year's tax filing system go together, and that's exactly what we did. And when we did so, we did a API-first procurement, meaning that the system became like Lego blocks. So when it comes, for example, for people who don't have time to go to the pharmacy to queue, and they want to instead pre-order on an app, in March, it took us only a couple of days to change the tax filing platform, so it became a mask pre-ordering platform. So across different ministries, they can nevertheless share the same infrastructure for cybersecurity reasons and also for privacy reasons. All these are already very well understood, familiar tax filing experience for people, so people don't have to learn another new way of interaction during the pandemic. Again, this made people feel safe and also made development much easier. So API-first procurement is also very important. Also, the civil society sometimes speaks through interpellations of members of the parliament. This is MP Gao Hong'an. She was VP of Data Analytics at Foxconn before joining the parliament, so she knows something about data. And back in March, she interpellated Minister Chen Shizhong of Health and Welfare, saying that according to the OpenStreetMap community, even though it looks like that the population centers align almost perfectly with the mass distribution, it's actually a data bias. And why is it bias? Because not everyone owns a helicopter. So what looks close on the map may not actually be close for the more rural places of people who have to rely on public transportation and so on. So she suggested that we need to correct this Taipei city-based bias. And Minister Chen, instead of defending the policy, again said, oh, legislator, teach us. And so we work with the OpenStreetMap community, and the very next day, we changed the distribution method and introduced the pre-ordering. So again, this is co-creation across all the different sectors in the society, including entrepreneurs. You're looking at Yolvent, a vending machine expert company, and what they did is that they converted pharmacies, which indeed relied on this manual processing of IC cards, to be self-service vending machines. And after they roll it out in the Taipei city, the National Health Insurance Agency figured out how to work with such virtual pharmacies, how to extend their API so that they can handle this kind of authentication. And once they published that API, we made sure that all the 4 convenience stores, again, in the economic sector, more than 12,000 different stores, all adopted their kiosks so that they can talk through the same API that the vending machine, the Yolvent's team talked upon. And suddenly in April, we began pre-ordering at all the different convenience stores, and that's more than tripled our distribution mechanisms. And that's the point when we got the 75% of people having access to masks and wearing them. When designing for the convenience store experience, initially we thought we could authenticate using the automated teller machines, the ATM available in pretty much all the convenience stores in Taiwan. However, when we did a focus group, I talked to, for example, this is Grandma Yang, a young friend of my own grandmother. My grandma is 88 years old and Grandma Yang is 70 year old. And this KOL, key opinion leader of the local community, really doesn't like going into a pharmacy to queue for a long time, and she used to complain a lot about a queuing experience. And so it looks like a perfect chance to introduce her to the ATM-based authentication and prepayment system. But she told me in no uncertain terms that if we use the ATM, then she will actually be very afraid, because she'll be afraid that a password will be copied by the people queuing after her, that she'll be afraid that after a misclick of a ATM button, maybe she'll accidentally transfer her saving to the Center of Disease Control accounts, or many other failure modes. And so she said, unless you can use exactly the same flow of experience as the pharmacies, she will not consider convenience store, even though it's much closer to her community. So we redesigned the entire flow so that she can actually count the coins and pay through the coins on the convenience store with the staff there, and use their national health card without requiring any use of an ATM card or mobile payments. And she was very happy, and she helped convince younger friends like 66 years old, 50 years old, and that is how we get the fully inclusive design process. So again, include the senior people, include people who don't think about the digital experience the same way as you do, as early as possible as focus groups. That will make sure that digital transformation feels safe to everyone involved, instead of just a few people in the society. So finally, I would like to say that all this experience, we've documented it. You can check it out at taiwancanhelp.us, and Minister Chen Shizhong, as pictured here, around the time last April when we hit 75% of mask availability, response to someone on Twitter asking if it's possible to dedicate some masks that we did not collect because many people already buy masks from other commercial vendors. So dedicate the mask rationing quota to international humanitarian aid. And we implemented that too last year. And to date, there's more than 7 million pieces mask dedicated this way. And we subsequently dedicated also the blueprint to make such a self-contained mask factory and so on. And I think this symbolizes the idea of Taiwan can help. So thank you for listening, and live long and prosper.
Thank you very much. It was a very meaningful speech. I'd like to mention it in the next discussion session. Okay, so now we'd like to move on the discussion part with Dr. Uenoyama. ここからは日本語で失礼させていただければと思います。
So from here on, we will be talking in Japanese. Thank you. So I was hoping we can discuss a number of things. And we do have questions from the audience, so we would like to be taking them up as well. First, we heard from Minister Tang, engineers, pharmacies, convenience stores, elderly people. It's a very good program of involving all these people who need such services. What was your impression after looking at that? I think it's a wonderful program that they're doing. That was a big message. Why do I think that's a wonderful program? Well, that's because people in that region, involving citizens to solve social issues, there's an acceleration of that, and IT is being fully leveraged. Not only for people who can use the technology, but they're trying to involve people who are not technology savvy. And that program is shown to people in other countries as best practice. It's wonderful.
So getting people get involved is really skillful area. Well, talk about the digitalization topic as we cover today. What is information revolution? There are many interpretations about that. However, one aspect is such that there are communication revolution relying on digitalized technology. My personal understanding is that majority of the problems in the society is happening because of the disconnect or gaps in communication. For instance, in Japan, we are under the state of emergencies. People in the national government and also people who are collecting vaccines and doing operations, they are stretching their capabilities too hard. But although they are working so hard, and yet not everything, every effort is not communicated to the general public. And of course, there are some lack of awareness, and of course, not everything can be communicated. But what Minister Tang has conducted is that although citizens and the government officials could be quite distant, however, by using digital technologies, all these are connected well, and then reflecting the opinions of the citizens to be reflected in the policies. And that is a great invention. And that is a deep learning that I was able to gain from me. Now, under the COVID situation, when we monitor the progress of situation for the policies implemented by the government, usually people are more receptive and passive. And listening to Minister Tang's discussion, getting involved the people as the person to actually take action. And that perhaps is the part of the success that they are able to make. Understood. Thank you very much.
In Japan, there's the work underway for the establishment of the digital agency. Can I hear your thoughts about this? I'm working in the private sector, so today we have many audiences from abroad. In Japan, digital agency is to be established. And there's a number of very innovative things happening. And there's an acceleration of hiring people from the private sector, engineers and designers. People in the 20s have been hired. So that's a very big, groundbreaking development. And I've had meetings with the Minister Hirai, and he's really serious about this. And the keyword that I heard is things like user experience and algorithm and AI. Those are some keywords that's been used. But in terms of user experience, digital technology that doesn't really make people feel that they're dealing with digital technology. That has to do with inclusiveness. People don't have to be conscious about digital technology. It's not just a tool for engineers and knowledgeable person, but when user experience has digital technology embedded, people don't have to feel that it's digital technology that they're dealing with. That is the concept. So I have high expectations for that. So in that sense, involving the private sector, and as we saw in the video, elderly people will find it convenient to use that service. So the Workban digital agency and the program in Taiwan, there are similar philosophies behind. Yes, I participate in various policy councils. Governance innovation, information technology innovation is happening so quickly. So if you are to legislate with preparing text, you can't make it in time. So IT could be used, and the private sector and the bureaucracy can collaborate to implement collaborative regulation to make it more agile so that the governance can be applied more agilely. So the way that the government is going to work is to be changed. And that is an idea that's been provided or proposed by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So the speed of interaction could be accelerated so that people can be involved. There's going to be more dialogue so that you can understand each other better. That is the direction that people are moving into.
Density of communication and how quickly would that be? It's going to be the key for the digital technology. I wish to move on to the next topic, and the large topic for this conference is productivity. And concept of productivity so far is the denominator. Well, usually the nominator is the value added, and the total input labor or cost comes at the denominator. So that is usually the function or equation. And with the digital technology, do you think that productivity concept will be changed? Is going to change, or do you think that the same concept will be applied? Well, I think that in the previous session, there were so many insights pertaining to that particular aspect. Well, there are many discussions around it, but when it comes to productivity, when we convert into the Japanese, it is how much production that you can generate. It seems that it is just improving efficiency of manufacturing and how to reduce costs. I think the Japanese word for productivity sounds like it is more of costs or the amount of increase of production. But I think that productivity is more broad. Digital media is changing the consumer behavior. What it means is that people, when they consume something, for example, eating a loaf of bread, and of course, they will access to bread and what brands or who makes the bread. And consumer purchase the bread with the stories behind it about the brands and so forth. So it is not simply the functions of the bread that they are buying. What relates to digital discussion is that, for example, although young people are exposed to digital media for 5 hours a day or 6 hours a day, and under the state of emergency situation, people are looking into the Zoom, and because of that, more than half of the day that people are looking the digital media. And experience consumption is now becoming prevalent. And it's not just products, but also experiences as well. And then productivity will increase under the digital media. So that is similar to the earlier discussion. Well, conventionally, function has been the core purpose of consuming something. However, the stories or the factors behind the products are the key, and digital media is accelerating such story consumption. Now, so what about the denominator, a cost area? What do you think? As I mentioned in my presentation, the software will further enhance the people's capability. So it's not that software eliminates the work of the people, but each and every person will have the larger capability or capacity because of the software. So like I mentioned earlier, potential of the personnel's capability would be exerted fully under the software-based society. So everyone's capability is going to be enhanced in the digitalized technology, and that is the solution that all the senior management have to address.
Empowering people, that will be the very crucial part. Now, talking about Japan, the manufacturing industry, as we heard about Kaizen, the conventional formula, denominator and numerator, that is what the focus has been in the manufacturing industry. How is it going to change in the future in terms of the relationship between the numerator and the denominator? The manufacturing industry is very broad, so I just wonder if I'm in the position to comment on it. But in terms of evolution of information technology, I think this is one way to look at it. Let me introduce to you how I see it. One is various things will be connected to the network. So it's not just a matter of manufacturing devices and sell it and that's the end of it. All devices will be connected and this is going to be a network. We call it network intelligence. Once it becomes a network, the algorithm on the server side will interact with people on the other side of the devices. And through machine learning, there's going to be an accumulation of data. What happens as a result of that is that the devices will not just be sold and that will be the end. They will be turned into services and placed on top of payment service. Of course, in doing business, you create something and make people happy, but you will continue to have connection with people who have bought your device. Many things could happen as a result. It's not just a matter of how much the price is for the device, how much is going to be the monthly charge, or it's going to be free at the beginning, it's going to be a volume-based charge. So from a manufacturing industry, this is not a threat. This is going to be an opportunity. And for the people who are making things and people who are buying things, there's going to be this connection of happiness and pleasure. So you can think of this in a positive way, and many interesting things can happen. So in that formula, value added, the way that you offer to customers with digital technology, it's more diverse. And what would be the better way of provision of that? That is going to be what the focus is going to be.
Now, slight change of the topic, and I'd like to cover some of the questions raised by the audience. There's a different topic, and I will read out the question. Well, 99% of the traders in a very renowned financial service provider have been fired because of AI. In many industries, there are massive labor forces being fired or discontinued because of AI. What do you think? I would like to express my own personal opinions. There are some jobs that will be discontinued and some will be recreated. I think that's a cycle have been happening all the time in the course of the history on the macro basis. So when you look at the individual point of view, how are you going to forecast the future trend and try to reposition yourself from disappearing job to the emerging job? So I think that is very important for individuals. What is your opinion, Uenoyama-san? Depending on the times and age, the popular job will be different, and that's all that I can say. But I'd like to go further beyond that. Like I mentioned in my presentation, there are something that human beings are doing well versus AI is doing greater. There are strengths and weakness for each. And most of the jobs is not completely replaced. It is going to be provided by the hybrid methods, by computers and the people. The algorithm trading is quite prevalent around the world, but the top traders still exist, which means that although the software usually do well in trading functions, and yet some type of human service is retained, which means that there are some collaboration exists in the future as well. To dive into this topic a bit more, now it's not just augmenting each other for the strengths and weaknesses. It's not all. There are some type of job that people easily can recognize. For example, catching a ball that can be easily done by people. But making a robot that can catch a ball is very difficult. But most of the people can catch a ball. Now, when people looks at the ball, then it is focused on that, and therefore physically it is constrained. But for machines, they can have multiple eye views, and therefore they can catch multiple balls. So when observation can be made for a long period of time in multiple ways, and from a physical point of view, if the capability is beyond a human being can provide, and then the machine can provide, that means the burden of the people could be reduced substantially by machines. And I think that type of technology should be implemented in multiple ways.
So rather than AI replacing people, it's just a matter of how we can have coexistence between people and AI. I think you need to shift that mindset. Thank you very much. Next topic. We do have a number of questions here. Through our presentations, we talked about DX, digital transformation. Those were some of the keywords used. DX, digital transformation. It's not just a matter of digitalization. How is it different from simple digitalization? And there have been many failure cases. How can you make it successful? These are the questions that we received. How would you answer them? DX and digitalization, these are just words. What's important is, for what purpose do you use digital technology? For what purpose do you want to have digital transformation? The will is more important than the technology itself. So listening to many presentations today, I learned a great deal. The notion of productivity. What do you do that for? There is a lot of such discussion today. It should be human-centric, or to empower human potential. So technology and other things, all of these things are technologies and means and tools. So what is going to be your will? So I think that is more important than the difference between the words of digitalization or digital technology. So it's not digital technology for the sake of digital technology. You have to be mindful, and you have to be aware of what you're doing this for. What's the ultimate goal?
Because of the time constraint, I'd like to close my discussion session for session 2.
We had a very meaningful discussion on the topic of smart transformation or productivity. A variety of topics were discussed, but to abstract it in terms of productivity or smart transformation, it is important to think flexibly about what kind of services are truly important for human or customer, and what kind of transformation is necessary for them, instead of dividing it into different areas, such as digital for digital, or manufacturing, etc. And it is important to continue thinking about what each stakeholder, such as government or industry and academia, should do in this regard. Thank you very much for your time. And I will take it over to MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yamato, Dr. Uenoyama, and Audrey Tang for the interesting and, of course, very relevant session and discussion. It seems like there's certainly many practical and philosophical issues to ponder when thinking about the relationship between human society and digital technology. Viewers, now we've reached the end of today's program. For the closing, I would like to invite the APO Chair, Zakia Sultana, Secretary of the Ministry of Industries and APO Director for Bangladesh, to give the closing remarks. Please welcome the APO Chair, who is connecting with us virtually.
Distinguished Directors, APO Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for your participation in this conference. The world is experiencing one of its most challenging times. Amid the sluggish economic growth and widened social disparities, we see even more clarity the importance of socioeconomic resilience and productivity improvement, highlighting the centrality of the productivity in your journey to the new normal. This conference celebrated the 60-year journey of the productivity movement in the Asia-Pacific region. I sincerely thank all the presenters, panelists, and moderators for their inspiring views and discussions, which shed light on the challenges and opportunities in this era and, most importantly, the way forward. My sincere gratitude goes to His Excellency Takashi Uto, State Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Government of Japan, Chairman Uzaburo Mogi of Japan Productivity Center, for their strong continued support to the APO, and to the APO Secretary General Dr. AKP Mokhtar for his leadership. I congratulate the recipients of the APO Awards 2021 and commend their efforts and commitment to the productivity movement. As the APO Chair, I am proud with the launch of the Tokyo Statement on the Centrality of the Productivity, reflecting our dedication to continuing productivity enhancement. Finally, I thank everyone for their active participation. I look forward to meeting you all in person when the pandemic situation improves and restrictions are lifted. Until then, please stay safe, well, and productive. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. With that, we would like to close this conference. We hope that everyone who has joined us today, whether in person or online, leaves with a better understanding of the key current issues surrounding productivity. Thank you once again to our speakers and moderators for your thoughtful contributions, and for the JPC for all your support in organizing the event. We're glad that all of our audience from APO member economies and beyond could join us today. Please stay healthy, safe, happy, and productive.